Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. When I was 17, I was working as a librarian in a public library situated at the edge of our town. My place was a little far from there. It took me almost 1 hour to reach my home from the office. I was a newcomer at the library and knew nothing much about the place. Everything was good there. I had no problem at all. Each day, many students came there from school and university looking for books. They used to sit there for hours and read books. Some of them were good in nature, while some were bad, but I didn't care much about them. My work was simply to provide them with suitable books. I felt good working there, and I had no problem at all, until that day. One day, a strange person came into the library and it was already too late. He entered when I was about to close. He asked me for a romantic love novel. I asked him to come tomorrow as it was already late, but he said to me that he needed that today, and he had come from a distant place, so I agreed. I asked him to wait while I searched for that book you mentioned. He sat there and waited for me. I went to the shelf and searched for the novel. At that time, I was looking back at him, and he was continuously staring at me. I was getting a bad feeling about him. From time to time, he was calling someone and asked them how much more time they needed. I was a little scared, so I hurried to search for that book and rushed toward him with the book. I got there and offered the book to him. He opened it and started reading there. I asked him, it was already too late and now is about to close, so please come tomorrow. But he ignored me and didn't reply to anything. I repeated myself, but again he remained looking at the book and ignored me. I got a little furious and shouted at him to get out of there as it was time to shut the library. Suddenly, he started to laugh. I couldn't understand why he was laughing. He stood up and grabbed my hand. I shouted at him, "What are you doing?" And he replied, "You'll know soon." Before I could say anything else, some more people came barging in inside the library. I was alone there, and there were 6 in number. I was frightened and tried to shout for help, but they shut my mouth with their hand and picked me up and took me behind the shelf. One of them went running and closed the door. They came to me and asked me to remove my clothes. I refused and slapped the one in front of me, and that was the biggest mistake I made. He slapped me back, but his slap had a lot of power and I fell down. My cheek was hurting like crazy from his slap. After that, he did what he wanted to. He removed my clothes and turned me naked. After this, they raped me one by one, again and again, and there was nothing I could do. I had also been shown naked, sexually explicit photos, and prepositioned again and again by those beasts. I asked them again and again to let me go, but they were merciless and didn't listen to my single word. They played with me to their heart's content, and at last, the one who I slapped kicked me right on my face with a heavy strike. My head bumped into the shelf behind me, and I fainted. The next morning when I woke up, I saw a lot of crowds along with cops inside the library. They all gathered around something that was not visible to me. I looked at myself and I was completely naked. I forgot that those maniacs raped me and left me in that state. The last thing I remember was that kick, and everything went blank after that. All of a sudden, something struck my head. I was completely naked and everyone should have stared at me, but no one was looking at me. I was a little shocked and they were gathered around. I rushed there to another corner where there was no one, and I couldn't believe what I saw. I was lying there dead. The cops had covered me with a white blanket, but inside, I knew I was completely nude. I was shocked for a moment. Then I understood that the moment he kicked me and I bumped into the shelf, I died, and they left me in that condition. Someone must have come to the library and found me in that state and called the cops. I went there running and tried to explain everything that happened to me, but they couldn't hear me. Then, I realized this was useless and there was no point in all this. I was there the whole time and watched the cops retrieve my body. After that, my body went for a post-mortem. I witnessed everything with my own eyes. After that, the cops informed my parents about all this. They asked for my number from my ID card and asked them to come. My parents saw me and started to cry. Watching them cry, I couldn't control myself and also cried. I wanted to tell them that I was here, but I couldn't do so. After that, my body was offered to the funeral, and my soul disappeared. This is my story, and now I'm dead. It all started when I moved to this new apartment. Suddenly, I started to receive some wrong delivery orders, but it turned out it was specifically sent for me. My name is Gracie Hart. I started modeling ever since I was 12 years old. Even when I was not very famous, people would often praise me for my beauty and my personality. And after graduating from college, I decided to completely focus on my modeling career. So I moved to this apartment right in downtown LA. Due to my hectic schedule, I had to order everything on delivery from the nearest store. No one was allowed to step inside the gate of apartment building, so the guard used to take my deliveries, and later he would drop it outside my apartment door. But one day, when I was having my periods, I ordered few packs of sanitary pads, and the next day, when I opened the door, I found chocolates in a carry bag lying outside my apartment. I thought the guard may have mistakenly delivered it to the wrong apartment, so I gave it back to him. But after a few days, I got another wrong delivery, and this time I had ordered modeling magazines, but instead the magazines I received were lewd ones. I got furious. I thought the delivery guy had pulled a joke on me, so I called him and started shouting at him, but he swore that he delivered the right ones. Then I thought it must be guard because whenever I passed by him, he kept staring at me with weird glaze. So I went to guard and threw magazines at his face and told him it's not funny. But to my surprise, he told me that he never delivered anything, and the magazines along with deliveries of other apartments are still with him. Day by day, the incidents kept increasing. Whatever I ordered, I would always receive another delivery. I realized it must be the work of some stalker. The agency I was modeling for was near my apartment, and one day after finishing shoots, I found a package outside my dressing room. I opened the package and there was a set of lingerie inside. I freaked out and threw it away. Ever since that day, I started suspecting everyone around me. The neighbors, the guard, the delivery guy, and even my fans. There was a big shoot for a major project in which I had to dye my hair blonde. The shoot gave a boost to my popularity, and one day I received a black hair wig delivered outside my apartment along with a note. It said, "Black suits you best." I panicked and ran inside my apartment. I picked up my phone from the side table to dial 911, but then I remembered there was a clause in my contract regarding the involvement of a law, which says I need my company's consent before getting involved with laws. So I called my manager and told him about my situation and asked him to report it, but he denied, saying that it must be fans sending her gifts and it happens with every other celebrity. My manager told me to calm down and not make any issues because it will harm the company's reputation. So I decided to solve this on my own and cleared my head, took out my diary and a pen. I started to write down all the details, starting from the first incident to the last one, and the names of people I suspected. And I began to live my life like nothing had happened, and I'm perfectly fine. But deep down, I was scared, alert, and I started to notice everything that seemed even remotely suspicious. Now, everyone I meet and walk past automatically came in my list of suspects, but I was not losing my mind. In fact, it was clearer to me now. I wrote down every suspicious activity around me. I asked the guards to show me the CCTV footage of the camera that is installed outside the apartment. He said the cameras are not working near my apartment and he will get it fixed by tomorrow. But after that, whenever I asked him, he made some sort of excuse and never let me see the footage. And that was the reason he became the main suspect in my list. I was still ordering foods and groceries through delivery and kept getting the weird packages outside my apartment door. Delivery guy was also one of my suspects, but since he was not allowed inside the gate, I could not think of any other reason except being the only one who delivers my stuff to the guard. It was my day off from work and I slept till noon. I decided to meditate, but after going through all these incidents, I couldn't calm my mind. So I decided to head to the gym that is in the basement of our apartment building. I spent the entire evening working out, and when I went back to the apartment, I found the door was unlocked. I decided to sneakily check who is it and has broken in my apartment. I opened the door without making a sound and tiptoed inside the apartment. Then I grabbed a knife from the fruit basket that was in the hall and looked around. That was when I saw a shadow in my bedroom, so I hid and tried to see the face of the stalker, but I couldn't see his face. I accidentally dropped my phone. He noticed me and rushed towards the gate. I tried to stop him, but he pushed me and managed to escape. I was fed up with this, so I decided to tell the police without even consulting the agency. I had collected all the evidences, my diary which contained the list of people I suspected, and the packages I received. I went straight to the police to file a report. After reporting these incidents, the police started their investigation, and after a few days, they found out who was behind all this. It was my manager. He fed money to the guards so that he can sneakily come and go to my apartment on his will. He confessed that he was one of my fans ever since I started modeling, and that was the reason he took the job of my manager at the agency. But since he never harmed me in any way, he only received a restriction order from the court. After that, my manager was fired from the company. I continued doing my modeling job, but I have decided to put faith in the law for future. The incident I'm about to tell you still haunts me to this day. It happened to me when I was still in high school. A new game was in the craze at the time, Dragon Age Inquisition. It was a 4-player life simulation game. In that game, the player had to take on the role of one of the 4 Inquisition. They were dispatched to eliminate either a cohort of Venatori, a battalion of Red Templars, a swarm of Darkspawn, a pack of demons, or a Katam and Kanari that had taken control of an area. Every location had 5 zones, and once the players completed the first 4 zones, the agents had to face enemies led by the enemy commander, either Calpurnia, Samson, or Emissary Alpha, an Envy Demon, or Sereth, depending on which faction they are fighting. Once the final wave of enemies was killed, the match ends victoriously. I was obsessed with that game, and often used to go to the nearby gaming cafe to play it. I used to play this game for hours, and after I was finished playing, I used to open my Facebook account and post my progress of it. I often played with different players, but there was one guy with name of Hunter Z309 whom I played most of my games with. We even used to talk using Dialogue Wheel. One day after the game, I logged into Facebook and uploaded my progress post. After that, I clicked the messages of others and went to check notifications. Someone had tagged me in a post, and the person who tagged me was unknown to me. So I checked the post, and there was a picture of me sitting in the cafe playing Dragon Age. The picture was taken 2 days ago. I recognized the outfit from that day. I looked around. Everyone was busy on their own. Surprisingly, he was in my friends list, and I had no idea when I added him. I did not think much of it at the time, but slowly it started to increase. I was tagged in more pictures of me. I had no idea who it was and when did he take my picture. I messaged him, saying it's rude to take pictures of others and upload it without permission. He instantly replied, "I'm sorry, I'll take it down." And after that, all the posts with my pictures were deleted from his account. I was relieved, but I was still not sure about him taking my pictures again. I messaged him saying not to do this anymore, but I should have been a little more specific about it. The next day, when after playing game, I checked my Facebook. The pictures were sent into my inbox and they were from the same day. I looked around and shouted, "Who is it?" Everyone started looking at me with confusion, so I couldn't recognize who it was. I texted him to stop it, but there was no reply. The pictures kept increasing day by day, so I complained about it to the cafe owner. But even after that, it did not stop. And along with the pictures of me being in the cafe, other pictures that were downloaded from my Facebook and were edited in nude models' bodies started to come. I was extremely worried about it and had no idea what to do. I thought of telling my parents about it, but since I used to come here by the excuse of going to the library, I was really scared, so I stopped going to the cafe. But it still did not stop. He started sending threat messages to me, along with the pictures of new models with my face edited on it. One day, he sent me a picture of a nude model in a weird pose and asked me to send him my picture in that pose. I immediately blocked him and deactivated my Facebook account. I locked myself inside my room and stopped going anywhere. My parents started to worry about me and started to ask questions. I had no courage to tell them about it after lying to them so much. I was depressed. After a few days, one of my friends sent me a picture that was going viral and told me that it was my picture. I checked and it was the same picture with that nude model in that pose, but with my face edited to it. I immediately told her about everything. She said I should tell my parents about it before they find such pictures from somewhere else and report this. I stomped back and forth in my room, arguing subconsciously to myself if I should tell them or not. What if they start to yell? What if they don't even talk to me anymore? What if they kick me out of the house? And what if they don't want me anymore? All what-if questions were roaming around in my mind. Somehow, I managed to gather enough courage to tell them about it and come clean. When we were all having dinner, I approached them, saying, "I need to tell you guys something." Their focus went toward me, and I started to tell them everything. I told them about how I used to go play games and not library and how I ended up with a cyber stalker. I thought that they would be disappointed in me, but that wasn't the case. They looked at me with a concerned look, and my mother spoke. "We know, honey, about you going to the cafe. We let you be because we know you study hard." My parents told me not to worry and they will take care of it. They went there and reported it to the cyber police department. The investigation started and they tracked the source of the post and messages. It turned out to be the cafe owner's son, and he was also the one who used to play with me online. All the posts that were uploaded by him, along with the viral ones, were completely taken down from the internet. I was relieved. But the next day when I went to school, I felt like everyone was staring at me and gossiping about me. Everyone was talking about what happened to me. My friends started to avoid me. But still, somehow I managed to finish my school and started preparing for college. Even to this day, sometimes people recognize me from the viral picture and ask me about it. It has become a habit of mine to ignore such people. This incident happened to me when I was 16, back when I was working in a theater. My work was simple, to check the customers before sending them in, and I don't think I made any mistake that day. But somehow, it happened. My life was going well. I was the eldest son in my family with 2 younger sisters. They are still studying, and I was the one who always kept books away. I was not too bright at my studies. I was just an average student, and my father didn't expect too much from me. I was always scolded by my father for roaming around with my friends who were the bad guys in his eyes. One day, I had an argument with my dad, and there was a serious one, and he kicked me out of his home. That day, I decided that I will only return to my home when I will earn for myself. That was something that I just threw up in my ego because I returned home just after a few hours when I felt hungry. Never mind, that was my house, and I had the whole right to return anytime I wanted. So coming back to the story, not too long after that, I got this opportunity. One of my friends, who was also a bad guy in my father's eyes, asked me if I wanted to work, and that was the same thing I wanted to hear for so long. I accepted his offer right that moment and started working here. It was a local theater in the center of town, and also not too far from my house, so it was completely suitable for me. I started working there, and my friend and other coworkers who also were seniors to me. All of them were good in nature, and I never felt some superiority from them while working there. Everything was going well, and I was very happy with my work, until this black day of my life arrived. It was a normal day like always. We were working at our best. The crowd seemed a little dense than on other days. I checked each and every one and everything was going fine. The show started and I entered and closed the door from inside. I was standing at the door in case any latecomers arrived or someone from inside wanted to go out. It was part of my work, so I was doing my job. The show was going on and everyone seemed to be quite drowned in that. All of a sudden, two guys from the middle row stood up and started walking toward the screen. All the other customers were getting disturbed by that, so they started shouting at them, but they didn't listen to anyone and walked to the screen and stood there. I also shouted and asked them to have their seats and let others watch the show. They ignored me and didn't reply to me. They just remained standing there silently. I started walking toward them and asked if they had any problem. Then they could walk out and let others enjoy the show. I would have reached only half the way when they suddenly opened their jackets, and what they said made everyone speechless. Their jackets were full of explosives, and they warned us that if anyone dared to move, then all of us would die the next second. In an instant, the whole theater became silent. No one had the courage to speak anything, and I was also one of them. Any wrong move could have resulted in all of our lives. I just remained standing there and kept on thinking about how they went past our security systems without being noticed. There was nothing I could have done at that time. We all were just sitting right on the spot where we were. Someone from the back seat tried to sneak while being hidden from their eyes, but they noticed him and pulled a gun from their back and shot him right on the moment. At first, he died on the spot, and the next second, he lay down unresponsive. I wanted to help him, but if I had dared to move a single step from there, then I would be lying just beside him. We all kept on being in their prison for the next 2 hours. After that, we heard an announcement. It was the police. Someone from the crowd there had secretly called the cops and informed them about the situation. I was a little relaxed, but they didn't seem happy with that. They became furious and started to ask who called the cops. No one from the crowd stepped and accepted that it was his doing. At last, they announced that they're going to explode themselves along with all of us. In a moment, the silent environment turned into panic and everyone started to run here and there. Watching the crowd getting out of control, they started firing at them blindly. Many of the crowds were shot and lost their lives, while many were injured. Meanwhile, by using this commotion as their bet, the cops broke in and caught them when they were not prepared. Watching the cops come in for my rescue, I rushed to those who were shot along with my other coworkers and cops also. We helped all those who were injured. The cops took them right then into their custody. I helped each injured person there to get out of there. Our managers asked us to lock the door and came out. I was closing the door when one of my coworkers noticed blood around my stomach area. I looked down and found that I was bleeding continuously. I pulled my shirt and noticed that while those metalheads were firing blindly, I was also shot with their bullet. But during that all-heavy commotion, I didn't even notice for a second. After that, my sight started to get blurry, and I fainted. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital, and my father was sitting just beside me on a chair. I got operated on right on time, and I was saved. That day, many of the innocent people who had come to watch the movie lost their lives. Those insane criminals were punished for their doings, and the theater was closed for a week. After that, everything went as usual, and I also returned to my job after getting fully recovered. But I can never forget that incident, ever, in my whole life. My father owned a Burger King near the fuel station at the edge of the borders in Colorado, and being the winter-walled place, our place was hot and warm and served a great deal of comfort. Though our menu was regular, the intensity of heat in the place made everything better. People would sit there for hours, and my father, being the businessman he was, he made the place so comfortable that people wouldn't want to leave, and that brought in more and more customers. And in the winter, the sales would just go off the charts, and people would come up and stay there for hours and ordering multiple times, and almost everyone was a regular customer there, and everybody knew everybody. Since my father was a self-made man, he taught us the same thing, and we were 14 when we started helping him in the Burger King, and I was probably the one rather more interested. My sister stayed back with my mother. She wasn't really into working a lot, but I looked up to my father, so I accompanied him every day. So he used to drop us at the school and then go back to the Burger King and start the day. And then my mother used to pick me up and my sister up and then drop me at the Burger King. I started with the cleaning staff, and then 6 months later, were promoted to work in the kitchen with rest of the fellows. I was responsible for the drinks in the beginning, and most of the work was of the machine, so it was much easier for me to stand there and work. I moved all the way to the kitchen and got promoted due to my work, and finally got to make the burgers. It was all pretty exciting, and to be able to work in a place that my father built from nothing was a great feeling. There were a lot of things responsible for getting promoted, but then even though there were the strict rules that my father had for the employees, the same rules applied to me, and he told me, if you ever call me dad or father in the joint, I will fire you. You can either be the employee or my son in that place, and as long as you are working there, you better be my employee. And I had the same rules like rest of them. And even then, there were some that were jealous of this, and some of them never missed the chance to make me look bad in the place. And every time that happened, I would get scolded by my father, and they would all just love it a lot. So one day, they all decided to do me once, and for all, and prank me, and get me fired from the job. I was adamant on staying away from the objections. One afternoon, when they were at the station minding the register, one of customers asked me to see their baby while she gets her bag from the car, and I stood there doing nothing but watching the baby, when a man came in and held the baby, and I asked his credentials, and I told him that I cannot let him take the baby while the mother is out, and I just stood there trying to be firm, and that is where things got out of hand, as I was trying to take a stand. This is when he grabbed me and nudged me a bit forcefully, and I fell onto the other table, and the old woman sitting in the chair fell on her back and hit her head on the floor, and in a moment, there was blood all over. And one of the employees came running to the man and said, "What the hell is wrong with you? You were only to scare him and not push him." And I asked him what was going on, and he told me it was just a prank they were trying to pull on me, but it was all sideways now as the old lady was bleeding from her head, as everyone was there blaming me, even though it was clear who caused this accident. The old lady won't just get up or even respond. They called in the ambulance, and someone must have called the police, and the police did came, and everyone was pointing fingers on me though. There were so many people talking that there was a commotion, but mostly it was me getting the blame for everything. And then I was reaching out for my phone when the police officer shouted, "He's reaching for the weapon," and then shot me 3 times from the distance of a meter. I looked at the police officer and I mumbled, "I was taking out my phone." There was nothing but panic in the place, and I could see the life slipping away in front of me. That was the last thing I remember before I woke up in the hospital. It is a miracle that I survived. I'm still recovering from it. I just don't know when I will recover from the trauma of what happened. That probably might take years. This incident happened to me about 2 years ago when I was celebrating my birthday party with my colleagues at Burger King. I was shocked to see that and was upset also because that ruined my birthday celebration and also sent all of us to the hospital. At that time, I was working in a software development company. I was a programmer and was working to my fullest to improve my skills and also to impress my boss. I always had this dream to work in a software development company in the future, and I followed my dream and worked hard to reach here. Finally, I got what I wanted. I was very happy with my work, and also, I was getting a good enough income, so I had no complaints at all from my life. Everything was going really well. I was living away from my parents in my hometown, which was several miles away from my company. I rented an apartment and lived with one of my colleagues, or you can say my best friend. She was my best friend and the one with whom I could share anything, and she always suggested the best for me. We both were true to each other and never hid any secrets between us, whether it was related to personal or professional life. We worked for the same department, and I met her after joining this job. The apartment we were living in was actually hers. I was just living in a shared house as she felt lonely there. We both were completely happy and satisfied with our current life. Everything was going well, until my birthday. The day was the 14th of December 2009, and this year I was turning 22. My friend told everyone in the office about my birthday. At first, they all greeted me and wished me a birthday, but soon they all started to demand a party, and since I was the birthday girl, I had no option but to give them a treat for my birthday. It was all thanks to my sweet but naughty friend. I agreed to throw a party after office hours. I wasn't planning to go somewhere far away, so I decided to take all of them to Burger King, which was just near our office, and treat them to a burger party. I wasn't sure about my plan, so I discussed my idea with my friend, and she agreed with me completely. Before I could say anything, she announced this to everyone in a loud tone, and everyone there started to dance. They all were happy and excited about the party. We worked till our office hours, and then around 6 p.m., we all left the office and went outside. At first, we decided to book cabs for all of us, but we were more than 20 in number, so we thought of walking as it was not too far from our office. I was walking ahead of my friend and everyone else was following our lead. We looked like a gang, but a decent one. Everyone stared at us while we were walking to Burger King, as if we were the point of attraction. I was feeling a little embarrassed, but I ignored everything and walked forward while keeping my head down. After walking continuously for 5 to 7 minutes, we reached our destination. We entered the store, and each of us grabbed a seat. Since it was my birthday, I went to the counter and asked the counter boy to receive order details from each one of us one by one. That was the best option, as I didn't know whether they liked my choice or not. The counter boy did exactly what I asked him to do, and after that, he asked us to wait for half an hour since our order quantity was too much, so we had to wait a little longer than usual. We all waited for our orders, and finally, after 20 minutes, our order was prepared and we all got our burgers. Before eating, all of them stood from their chairs gathered around me and wished me again, but in a loud voice with lots of claps. I was feeling embarrassed there, but inside I was really happy. This was the best birthday experience of my life after coming away from my parents and my family. I thanked all of them and asked them to enjoy the party. They all went back to their seats and started eating their burgers. We all would have just grabbed 1 or 2 bites when we heard a loud commotion outside the store. We all looked outside, and suddenly, lots of dogs came running inside the store. We all were shocked and stood up on our chairs. The dogs were even greater in number than us. They saw a crowd inside the store and started barking at us. Soon, the dogs smelled our burgers and snatched almost all of them. We all were there and witnessed the dogs enjoying our meals. We all were afraid to speak a word since there were more than 20 dogs in that Burger King. It was my birthday and my party for my colleagues, but instead of them, the dogs were enjoying my treat. We remained in fear of those dogs for the next 15 to 20 minutes until the counter boy called the Animal Control Bureau to come and catch those dogs. They arrived in the next 15 minutes and caught all the dogs and took them along. After everything was cleared, we looked at each other's faces and laughed out loud. We were laughing at our condition, and after thinking that it was not our party but the dogs were the ones who enjoyed the party the most, they ruined our party. Even after that, I asked the counter boy to repeat our order, but they all refused to do so since I had already wasted too much money. Also, after the dogs came in, a foul smell covered the whole store, and it was difficult for us to stay there any longer. We all decided to call it off for the day and return back home. They all wished me again for my birthday and went back to their roots, and I also returned to my apartment with my friend. We all were in a bad mood since all our planning was in vain, but there was nothing we could have done now, so we accepted the fact and went to sleep. My name's Jensen, and I'm 18 now. Today, I want to tell you about an incident that I witnessed when I was in Walmart that was a little far from my home. I had visited that place several times before, but after that day, I never put my step there even once. Someone was almost killed right in front of me, and after seeing that pool of blood and screaming, I couldn't tell how much afraid I was. This incident happened about 3 years ago when I was 15. I was a school-going girl, and also a shy one. I didn't have many friends even at school, but I was bullied by many. They used to call me the girl with mirrors or double battery and several other names, but I didn't care that much. At the start, I felt bad and even cried and decided not to go to school. But then I became used to it, and nothing bothered me much after that. I had decided that I would only focus on my studies and let them tease and bully me as much as they wanted. I just kept on ignoring them. I am the only daughter of my parents, though I had an elder brother who was 2 years elder than me. In an accident, we lost him. Now there was nothing except his memories. My mother got a paralysis attack due to that incident. Until now, she fears a lot when she thinks about the past. My dad and I try to act normal in front of her whenever she loses her control and breaks out. Her medications were going on, but I don't think they were affecting her at all. I was the only one after my dad who could look after her, though her mother also came to live with us when she heard about all this, but even then, she was old and was able to do only light work, so it was all upon me. One day, my father told me to visit Walmart after school and purchase some fish and meat, since it had been a long since we ate meat last time. He had some urgent work at his office, so he couldn't go and asked me to go instead of him. There was no problem with that, since I just had to sit in my car and the driver and go to Walmart and then return home. And also, I hadn't eaten meat for long, so I was excited about it. I went to the school, and as Dad asked me, I walked out of the school and called my driver to come and pick me up. He came and took me in. I asked the driver to take me to Walmart as I had some shopping to do. After half an hour of driving, we reached Walmart. I asked the driver to park the car and come to the grocery section as the bag might get heavy. I went in and took a trolley. I walked to the grocery section and took everything I needed from there. After that, I also went to the beauty section and took some nail polish and lipstick for me. I was waiting for my driver to come in and take the trolley to the counter, but he was late. I slid the trolley to a bench that was constructed in the beauty section and waited for him to come. I was sitting there when I saw a lady who might be in her 30s come through the gate and remove the goggles from her eyes. She came straight to the beauty section. The strange thing was that she was already in tons of makeup and was sparkling even from a mile away. And even then, she was here for shopping. She started looking at every shelf. Everyone there was staring at him like crazy, and why shouldn't they? She was looking at a complete piece of garbage. It looked like she had come here straight from a play or drama. Her attention was eye-catching. I was looking at her search when I heard some commotion outside the beauty section. There was a masked guy with a knife and a gun in his hands. He came running inside the beauty section while pointing the gun toward the security guards. He came in and grabbed that lady. She was wearing a heavy gold necklace along the rigs and all that, and according to me, that chain snatcher was aiming for his necklace only. He grabbed her from behind and started snatching the necklace from her neck, but she was not ready to give in. She was struggling hard to save her necklace. So in this fight, the masked man had the necklace and kicked her in the stomach. While she bent down a little with pain, he snatched the necklace out of her neck, but in a hurry. I think he got a little too harsh since her neck was chopped due to that necklace. The chain snatcher tried to run, but he didn't see the mirror door while looking at the lady and bumped hard into the gate. As soon as he fell after bumping into the gate, the security guards came running and grabbed him. But the lady was not in good condition. She fell while holding her neck. I was sitting just a few steps away from her and could see her. Soon she fell and got unconscious. Within a minute, there was a pool of blood around her. I knew I should have helped her, but I couldn't since my legs froze after seeing that blood. I couldn't move my body either. I was just sitting there like a statue, but the security guard came running and put a handkerchief from his pocket and wrapped it around her neck to stop the bleeding. After this, with the help of some other crew members, he took her to the hospital. Meanwhile, the other guard called 911 and called the cops to arrest him. The cops came in and took him with them. After this mess cleared, my driver came running in and took my trolley to the counter and got the bill ready. Meanwhile, I was sitting there waiting for my bill. As soon as he returned, we got into the car and returned home. I couldn't tell this incident to my dad and mother since I didn't want to give her any stress, but I never heard from that lady after that. Did she survive or not? But believe me, that incident was the scariest incident of my life, and from then, I took a promise to myself that I would never go to that place. This incident happened to my friend Jessie during winter season. She was married and also a working woman. Apart from this, she was a brave girl and never feared anything before this incident happened to her. This was something that she had never expected. Though she lost her life that day, I thought to share her experience with all of you, thinking that her story could help others learn something about her experience. So, let us start. Jessie was married about 2 years after her graduation, and her husband supported her, so he let her continue her job. Everything was going well when just before Christmas, her husband got some urgent work due, to which he had to go out of the country for a few days. Now she was alone at home, so she decided to return to her parents and celebrate Christmas with them. She booked her tickets and her flight was scheduled for 4:30 a.m. the next morning. She started packing up, but the main problem for her was reaching the airport before 4 in the morning. She knew someone who had a taxi and lived in her neighborhood, so she went to him and asked him to drop her at the airport before 4 a.m. the next morning. His name was Alexander, and he was in his late 40s. He agreed to take her to the airport, but he was charging extra money for taking her there. She didn't have any better choice, so she agreed with him and returned to her home. Alexander was also happy with their behavior of Jessie, but who can stop this from happening? Since Alexander had to come early at 3 a.m. and leave the airport with Jessie, instead of going to the parking lot, he parked the taxi near his home and started trying to sleep by extending the seats of the taxi. He was not in the mood to go anywhere else, and also he was getting enough for this trip, so he waited. He tried hard to get some sleep, but the mental problem did not let him rest. He had taken a huge loan amount from the bank for his wife's treatment, and now he had to pay the installments of the 3 weeks to the bank. He was worried about household expenses and bank installments. He was hoping for some miracle to happen to him, but his luck was not that strong. He thought for a long time, but couldn't think of anything. At last, Alexander made a plan of murder. While thinking a dangerous plan was formed in his mind, and he decided to execute it. He wanted to get rid of this troubles by robbing Jessie. He thought that Jessie is a resident of another city, and no one would even know. And also, she was economically a good target to be robbed. When Jessie booked him, his eyes went to Pooja's purse full of notes. While planning her murder, all these things came to his mind, and Jessie's purse was also waving in front of his eyes again and again. He fell asleep while planning in his mind. Even his sleep was broken when Jessie came to him with her belongings and asked her to keep them all inside the car. After placing the luggage in the taxi, Alexander took his water bottle and splashed it on his face to freshen up. When Jessie came, he took her in and went towards the airport. While driving to the airport, he was continuously thinking about his plan of murdering Jessie and robbing her. On the other hand, being tired of the office work and packing, Jessie couldn't sleep properly, due to which she fell asleep while sitting in the cab. Alexander was noticing all from the panel window, and seeing Jessie sleepy, the devil in his mind started taking a fierce form. Instead of taking her to the airport, he turned the taxi towards a deserted place. Jessie was completely unaware of all this. When Jessie woke up, she got scared seeing the silence around the cab. Before she could talk to Alexander after stopping the taxi, Alexander hit Jessie on the head with a jack rod, due to which she fell unconscious and her head started bleeding. After hitting her, Alexander took her purse and started looking for money inside. Jessie regained consciousness even before Alexander could run away with Jessie's belongings. Alexander caught her and put Jessie to death by adopting him with a knife kept for his safety. Later, he fled, leaving Jessie's dead body there. Screaming for her rescue, she got down from the cab and started running towards the road, but she could not run away from her death. He was relieved after robbing Jessie, but he was shocked when he did not find anything from Jessie's purse as expected. The problem from which he had committed such a big crime could not be fulfilled. He could not understand how or what to do. That's why Jessie's mobile became a ray of light for him. He sent a message from Jessie's mobile phone to her husband Daniel, giving her the account number to deposit the money. This became a noose around his neck. Daniel, being a highly educated and clever person, shared this information with the cops and took them with him in disguise when he went to meet Alexander. He never came in front of him, but when he kept the bag and left there, a strange guy came and took the bag. But before he could run away, The cops caught him and took him into custody. After a detailed interrogation, he was produced before the court for final judgment, and since he had killed Jesse, he was sentenced to be hanged till death. After that, he was sent to jail in judicial custody. The police had already recovered the knife, jackrod, and taxi used in the murder at his instance. There was no fault from Jesse's side. Even then, that unique and kind girl lost her life just because of that cab driver's lust for money. My bunch of buddies and I had always dreamt of making a trip to Vietnam. It was something that we had been looking forward to ever since we saw Good Morning Vietnam the first time. We had planned on a road trip in Vietnam, and we had been planning it for years now, and just trying to come up with a mutual time to go. And getting out of school and going to college, we were really excited to meet together once again after a long time after college. We decided to do it before we all get involved with our careers and stuff, and before that, we needed to complete this trip. We were all planning ahead, getting everything ready, our finances, itinerary, and everything that we needed before the trip. And there was even contacted one of our friends, Rebecca Tran. She was the Vietnamese foreign exchange student that we hosted in our school, and she became our friend back then, and she was in on the trip and wanted to be the one to show us around. We were making plans for the trip, and then we decided the road trip will start from Hanoi and go anywhere it can be. The first thing was getting good money on the flights, and we got the flight in Vietjet Airlines. The Vietjet Airlines was one of my friend's choice, and he said it's good, and the hostess in there was pretty, so service is going to be great. We decided that we make sure that our friend was in control, because last thing we need was a menace in the plane trying to make things worse. We boarded the flight on the Monday from the JFK airport, and my friend was already buzzed, and we were worried that he might start something up mid-air, and we were already ready to handle things in case they go south, because we had this feeling that things will definitely go south. With him, things always go wrong. As soon as we get onto the plane, we slipped a sleeping pill in his drink in order to make sleep like a horse during the journey. We all were sitting in our respectable seats when the hostess came and asked us for the drinks, and we all accepted them. Then, one of them came closer to me and asked them if I would like to drink. I told him sure, and then she said for that I will have to come with her. I know what was happening, and I agreed and started walking with her. And then as I was following her, my friends commented inappropriate things that she completely ignored with laughs. And as I went through the door, she took me straight to the cockpit, and I was sure about why she was going there. And she opened the door for the cockpit, and there it was, the pilot. But beside the pilot, there was a man in a Hawaiian shirt with a gun pointed over the pilot's head. And then the shock came to me as I realized that the plane was getting hijacked. But I thought, what does this have to do with me? So I was standing there, and I was scared and clueless. And then the guy told me, "Hey kid, everybody out there don't know it yet. This plane has got hijacked, and you have to announce it. White guy doing it would be better and take this beautiful hostess with you." I just couldn't understand what was happening. And then he said, "I don't want to freak out people as if you don't do it. I have a man who's in the passenger seat and undercover. If you don't do it, we open fire. Most of you die, or everybody dies. Your choice, kid." And I was left with that choice. And I was puzzled out of options, knowing when I had to do it no matter what. As I got out, my friends saw me getting out of the plane with the air hostess by my side, and they were smirking, thinking that I hit it off with that hot-looking Vietnamese air hostess. And I just tried my best not to make eye contact with them. And I get in front of everybody and tried to canvass the guy who could be the possible shooter. Now this was something that happened before the World Trade Center, so the security wasn't as tight as it used to be with the airplanes. And now that I was out and about to do the announcement, my eyes just kept on trying to locate the other man, but it wasn't helpful. I then announced, "Everybody, please listen. I have a message from you all, from a special man in the cockpit." I was reading the lines as he gave me. "Things will be smooth for you all if you act the way you are right now, quiet and calm. If you panic, it could be troublesome. This plane is under the control of a couple of hijack-doing duo, so in case you have to make it safe, be calm and cooperate. Pull out all the money due you have and dump it into the bag. My beautiful friend over here will come to your seats, and you have to drop whatever money you have in the bag, and don't act smart. One of my friends has a bomb, and he's quietly sitting between you guys. Act up, and he let go, and we all become barbecue in the air. Give the money, and smile back, and I will be out here without being a problem, a massive problem." The air hostess started walking asking for the money, and people were dumping the money in the bag. And when they reached my friends, they dropped the cash too, and she collected all the cash. While she was doing that, I realized something. He said that his friend had a gun, yet the script he gave me said it had a bomb. There was something missing about him, and I just felt like he wasn't as dangerous as he was claiming to be. I signaled the air hostess to stay back with the crew, and took the bag from her and went inside the cockpit. And as I did, the man was pointing the gun at the pilot, and I said, "Here's the money. Now call your man to drop his knife." And he said, "Don't worry, he will not stab anybody." And I said, "You dropped your magazine down, man." And the man, quickly out of focus, said, "It doesn't have it. It's a prop, dude." And they all looked at the man. The pilot, me, and the co-pilot just looked at the man. "There's no friend, is there?" And the man just said in disappointment, "No." And we just looked at the man. I had the bag in my hand. I took the gun out of his hand and then told him to just get outside and wait. And we sat through the flight where he said he was inspired to do it from Clark Olsen from Norway. The flight lands and the police come in before anybody could get off the plane. And instead of arresting the man, they arrested me. It's not their fault. I was holding the fake gun in the cash bag. I did this to myself. Well, the pilot cleared things up, and then I was let go. My friend woke up and asked what happened. We told him, and he was glad it wasn't him this time who caused the trouble.
I was in a toxic, borderline abusive friendship with a girl from the ages of 9 to 12. Here's some background information to give you a little understanding of what my life was like back in the late 20s and early 2010s. I grew up in a very tumultuous household. My parents hated each other, and my extended family, along with my immediate, were plagued by mental illness and drug addiction. So needless to say, I was an anxious child who was drawn to unstable people, and suffice it to say that they were drawn to me. I was a shy 11-year-old girl who, like many others before I, used internet as a way to vent my frustration and anger about my home life. This was the time when AOL was the main source of communication between friends. And I was no stranger to this, along with MySpace and Facebook. However, I wasn't like typical preteens of this era. Also, I thought I kept my profiles private, never accepted a follow or a friend request that I didn't know, and never shared my location on the set profiles. This is the part where I introduce Tanya. Tanya isn't her name, of course, as I don't want her real name in case she just so happens to read this thread, watches the YouTube channel, or listens to the podcast. So we'll just call her Tanya. Tanya and I met in elementary school, one of the points in my life where my family situations was quite volatile. And in the retrospect, I think she sensed this. I was vulnerable, and Tanya took advantage of my innocence. She never really displayed any signs of her true intentions in the beginning, as they never usually do. But she would do shady things now and again, manipulate me into begging my mom to stay on the computer until the wee hours of the morning so we could go on NSFW websites, ghost me when I didn't give her my favorite pen, or she'd yell at me when I couldn't perfect a guitar solo on Guitar Hero. She did some other things to me that I believe my brain blocked out due to trauma. My mom didn't like her either. Parents always have a weird intuition when it comes to friends. And I wish to God I would have listened to my mom before Tanya did what she did to me. Tanya's behavior changed for the worst when we turned 11. Tanya was openly jealous of my success in the school. Granted, she was incredibly smart herself. But she always made it a point to mock me for having great grades, and would comment that since I wasn't pretty enough, having good grades would be a nice balance. Nice. Right. It took me a while to build my self-esteem. After all of the snide remarks you would make about my weight and my face, and only now, as a 22 years old, do I think that I'm beautiful and have a wonderful figure. Anyways, back to Tanya. As a result of jealousy and growing resentment towards me, she began to plot my downfall. And I make no exaggeration either. This girl literally tried to ruin my self-worth even more than she already had. It started in 6th grade. Tanya and I were remarkably close that year, and I wanted to do everything with her. We would talk all day in school. We would chat all night on AIM. And one particular evening, Tanya and I were talking about boys, being that we were hormonal preteens. Our conversation would usually turn on to who we liked in the school that day. Being that I had a horrible relationship with my father, I didn't really trust boys in from the early age, so it was rare if I developed a crush on one. I remember Tanya and I's conversation going a little something like this. She asked, "Do you know Mark, the kid in my class?" "Yeah. Why?" I replied. "I heard he likes you." She said. Surprised, I answered, "What? No way." "Totally," he told me. "You want me to talk to him and give him your username?" "Yes, of course. Oh my God, thank you, Tanya." My heart was racing. A boy liked me. Impossible. When Tanya told me that she would give Mark my username for AIM, I nearly exploded in my seat. 11-year-old me couldn't believe I was going to have my first real boyfriend. How wrong was I? Fast forward to the next night. I was getting ready for the bed when I heard the famous AOL ding sound of my iPad Touch. You know the sound I'm talking about. When I checked the notification, it was a message from MarkyBoy99. I don't know the member username, so we'll just go with something like this. I turned red. Tanya had really talked to Mark and gave my user. She was truly the best. He messaged me with the usual, "Hey," emphasis on the 3 Y's. And I responded, "Hey." I didn't want to come off as desperate, so I only used 1. Why not even a minute later? He messaged me back. We talked all night about everything. Our days, how school was, what type of silly bands we like. Typically 11-year-old stuff. And I have to admit, I was smitten right off the bat. I think it was partly because I never really had a boy like me before, and the other part being that my self-esteem was so low that I never thought a boy would be capable of liking me. Also, it could be because Mark was one of the most popular boys in the school at that time. He played football, was mouthy to the teachers, and was extremely outgoing. All the things a young girl would be attracted to. We talked for months. My puppy love grows for him more and more every time we chatted. Of course, I never spoke to him on the phone, nor did I get his phone number, because why would you do that, right? All the time I was speaking to him, Tanya will be gassing me up, telling me how proud she was of me, and that I deserved a boyfriend. My suspicions of Mark only began to grow when I attempted to approach him during the school hours. Again, I had anxiety, so I would never really speak to Mark outside of AIM. When I went to talk to him, Mark looked confused, as if he had never had a conversation with me before in his life. He turned away from me on the playground and walked to be with his other friends. Ugh. Weird. This wasn't like him. He was usually so chatty with me online that I expected him to welcome me with open arms in person. My ego was bruised. My little 11-year-old mind tried to rationalize this behavior by chalking it up to him not wanting to talk to the nerd. Since he was so popular that he just preferred to keep our relationship online, I told Tanya the news, and she seemed to be genuinely heartbroken for me. She was just as angry as I was, and vowed to confront Mark later that day during the music class. I was happy Tanya had my back, and as far as I knew, she was going to tell Mark off about him being a total jerk to me. While it worked, later that night, I got a message from Mark telling me how sorry he was for ignoring me, and then he was just going through some family things. Back in love I was. I didn't care that Ma ignored me during the school. I didn't care that he rejected my advances in person. As long as I had him to talk to online and Tanya's support, I was fine. I even told my mom about him, and she was extremely happy for me as well. Another month passed, and it was March 31st, 2011. Mark messaged me and told me that he had something very important to tell me. The next day, the anxiety began. What was it? What did he have to tell me? At that point, I considered myself Mark to be dating. So I was anxious, and he was either going to break it off with me or that he was going to make it public in school next day. I told my mom and Tanya almost on the verge of tears with how excited and nervous I was. Well, the next day, April 1, 2011, rolled around, and this is what followed. It was around 7 p.m., and I was on the Club Penguin, as I usually was until I heard a familiar ding. It was Mark. It was time for the news being waiting for all day. He wrote, "Hey babe," winky face. "Oh my god. Hey, I've been waiting for you to chat with me all night. Sorry babe, I was practice. Are you ready for the news?" I was shaking with anticipation at this point. Even writing this now, a whole swell of emotion is resurfing. "Yes, of course," I replied excitedly. It was then that Mark sent me a picture. I opened it. Only it wasn't Mark. It was Tanya. And she was holding a handwritten sign that said, "Happy April Fool's Day." At first I started laughing. And I mean, it was an ugly laugh. Of course it was a prank. Tanya had gotten me so good, right? Well, wrong. It was then when the realization hit me that I started to stop. I felt betrayed, like a loser. Tanya had been behind Mark all along. And she had been planning this big joke since October 2010. She had been so jealous that she pretended to be someone else and string along my emotions when she knew I was already in a rough place mentally. She told me that I was stupid to even think that Mark would even like me in the first place, and that I was dumb for not asking his number. Tanya had been this for 6 months. An 11-year-old girl plotted Mark, used him to make me think that a boy liked me, and tricked me into believing that I had a boyfriend. All the while telling me when we hung out that she was happy for me and Mark and I were a cute couple. I told my mom, who then called her mom. My mother was livid, to say the least. She told Tanya's mom to tell her daughter never to speak to me again, and I was crushed. My best friend of 3 years had catfished me because she simply wanted to play a joke. I was loyal to her, and she toyed with my emotion because she could. Tanya had tried multiple times to guilt-trip me into being her friend again in the months that followed, leading into 7th grade. One of the more memorable and honestly messed up times being when she messaged me a few days after my birthday in August to tell me that her mother had just died in a horrible car crash. Her body was dismembered, and they could only find her head and wedding ring. As anyone would be, I was in tears. Tanya's mother was nothing but lovely to me, and learning that she died in such a violent way crushed my soul. I started talking to Tanya again, asking her when her mother's funerals would be. Tanya then revealed to me seconds later, after speaking to her about the grisly details of her mother's passing, that she was just kidding and was pranking me again, and that I was stupid to believe her. She even sent a video of her laughing at me. I was disgusted. Who would even say something like that? What 12-year-old would message someone that their mother was dismembered in a car crash? She then revealed her ugly and, quite frankly, evil intentions when we were at the beginning of the 7th grade, and she became friends with a girl named Kylie. They both invited me to sit with them at their lunch table, and because I was desperate for friends, I stupidly accepted, only to be met with hordes of insults and laughter behind my back every time I wasn't looking. Tanya then messaged me one night telling me to kill myself, and that the world would be a much better place without me in it. She had Kylie to tell me to go jump off a bridge, and Tanya told me that she hated me and was never really my friend to begin with, that I deserved all the pain she put me through the year prior. I again told my mom, who then called the police. She had had enough of Tanya, and so had I. For 4 years, I have put up with Tanya's malicious behavior, and I just couldn't handle it anymore. My mom made me delete my account, and Tanya's mom told her never to contact me again, or else. My mom advised me to move the lunch tables, but I was hell-bent on not letting Tanya win. For the entirety of 7th grade, I sat at the same table as Tanya, only I spoke to my friends on the other side of the table. I never spoke to her, looked at her, or gave her any sort of attention. Kylie was scared to death of me too afterwards, as the police had gotten in contact with her family as well. It's been 10 years, and I still haven't spoken to Tanya. I'm 22 years old. I have 2 bachelor degrees, one in psychology and other in history, and I'm now working towards my master's in clinical social work. Tanya did other things to me too, that I could write a whole other story about, but I think writing this one helped give me closure on a part of my childhood that scared me for years. I thank God for my mom stepping in when she did, because I don't know where I'd be without her. As for Tanya, I don't know where is she or what she's doing, and I'd rather not. On the off chance she stumbles upon the story, I have a message for her. Your jealousy and wishes for death upon me did not win, and I truly hope that karma does not come around one day to bite you in the ass. Tanya, let's never meet again.
It all started on the last day of school, when we said each other goodbyes and started walking back to our houses. It was a cold winter afternoon, and the roads were packed with fresh snow, and through the streams of students walking by, you can hear a thud of someone falling at regular intervals. Our black leather shoes were just not made for the snow. The regular thuds and the giggles as everyone would take a fall, and I was giggling when my friend fell. I was the next one, and as I fell, I took my other friend with me, and down we did go. We got up, dusted the pants, and me and my friend who fell took the normal route, while another friend of ours took the different routes, but we exchanged the backpacks, as ours was heavier and they were going to take a shortcut. They took our bags and we took theirs, just to even things out, and we started walking. We were at the famous square point when a car took a one-way turn and approached us from behind. We had no idea of this happening, and we were busy talking and making our way back to our dorms. Suddenly, I felt a hand grabbing me from behind. For split seconds, I thought it was someone I knew. I looked back. They were strangers. And there, in split seconds, I made the decision and let my friend's bag go and started running, and so did my friend. The passerby tried to intervene, but they fired shots in the air, and as they did, everyone made their way and dispersed, and we stopped right where we were. And I could see it was my friend. He was down. The bullet that they allegedly shot in fire must have ricocheted and hit him slightly and is cutting it. He was screaming in pain, and I was hiding behind the square bunch when they approached my friend. And as they did, I thought they might hurt him, so I got out. They slapped my friend and picked me up and dropped me in the car and headed to a secluded location. After a while, they decided to ask me to write a letter to my parents, telling them how I've been kidnapped, and they said they would deliver it to my house. They asked me to add their number to have a chat, so I wrote the letter, and then, without asking me the address, went on to deliver it. And then they waited. They never showed me their face. I told them I was angry, and they did arrange some pizza and Coca-Cola for me. They waited for 2 days, and there was no response. They thought the address they used was wrong, and they decided to cross-check it with me. And when I gave them the address, they realized that they had it wrong in the first place. They sent the letter via their secret accomplice. They told me why they kidnapped me. They said that my father was responsible for making the life of the people of the neighborhood hell. He told me that my father approved an industry that poisoned their water supply and killed most of their people. They even had the evidence to prove. All they needed was media to go on and disclose it. But it failed when media decided not to expose the tycoon. So instead, they decided to kidnap me and do it via live television. As they told me this, I realized that they have got the wrong person. And as I told them, they decided to have a decent conversations. They were ready to let me go since they weren't really criminal. All they wanted to do was a right thing. They just didn't know the way to do so. So they decided to come up with a plan where they would push me in front of a media office with all the evidence and record it all live on their media phones and upload it. They also uploaded all the evidence firsthand into the drive that they gave me access and asked me to give it to someone who I can trust. They apologized as they said they will push me when they let me out. And so they did. They pushed me out from the car. It was the same media house that covered my story of kidnapping, and with all the evidence, as I was lying on the floor as they pushed me, people picked me up, and I was comforted in the waiting room. But I got up and straight away gave the copy of evidence to the editor and passed out. Turns out, I was in shock even if I didn't look scared. I woke up in my home, and the first thing I did was turn up the television. And I was glad to see that they decided to run the news, and the tycoon was arrested, and he was none other than the father of my friend who went with me. We never realized he was that rich. Turns out, I was credited for bringing in the evidence, and police did ask and hassle me with questions for the next few days. But I kept the secret with me. They never caught those who kidnapped me, and I never snitched. My friend stopped talking to me as he blamed me for his father's arrest. He eventually left the place and moved away. A month later, I was at the local cake shop where I ordered a pastry to go. The man did not charge me and told me that I can come to the place for a treat anytime. I recognized his voice. and nodded as I smiled. And to this day, I am still friends with the baker. The very baker that kidnapped me along with his friends.
Back in our days, there was no shipping sites or no orders in delivering things. We had to go to the market to get the things, and if it wasn't in the market, then we just had to live without it. But we also did not have so many things to choose from. But these days, we are busy buying things we don't need. I found myself going deep into the rabbit hole of seeing things and fighting the urge to buy whatever I saw. And then working on a computer cannot be considered one of the things I'm best at. So here I am, going through this site called Amazon. And then pops open an advertisement in front of my screen that says I have won something, and I clicked at it. And then it started link after link after link. It brought me to this page, which now I understood was the dark web. At that time, I had no idea what dark web is, and all it said was Amazon Dark. So there it was, all sorts of things that you would find in Amazon if it was for evil people. A whole lot of drug sections and sex products, and people ready to sell themselves for sexual favors. I was pretty keen and not to get indulged, minding that at that time, it did not seem to me as serious as I take it today. At that time, all I thought of it was that maybe it is a prank website. And so in the spirit of pranking, I ordered a mysterious box, and they asked me on the form, who do I want to give this to? And I filled in my wife. I just wanted to give her a surprise. And then it asked me if I wanted it fresh, and I said, sure. It also asked me if I wanted to see the process. I checked yes to everything, and then waited for it, having no idea that I was just spending my time on dark web. 2 days later, the box arrives, and it is a wooden treasure chest box. And I brought it in and decided to give it to my wife, who was surprised and happy by the gesture. And then as she opened it up, she screamed so loud. It had a heart in it. Something that looked like a real human heart. I saw the heart, and it seemed real to me, and along with it, a pen drive. I told her maybe it's a prank, and we sat and started watching the contents of the pen drive, and it sent a chill down our spine. It was the video of a boy being kidnapped in Europe somewhere, and then his heart being cut open from his body and shipped to us. My wife panicked and fainted, and the first thing I did was call the police. And then they were the ones who informed me that I was on the dark web where I ordered it. I had no idea, but they were nice enough to help us out through all of that. Later on, they did find out whose heart it was, and every information, and spent years on that case, until now that the culprits have been caught. I never asked the cops who he was, and all of the story, but now that the culprits have been apprehended, I want to know about the person who was behind the heart. Because somewhere, there is this lying guilt that I was responsible for the death of that young boy.
Who would have thought of all the place bathroom is going to be the scariest place that would become the trauma of me for the rest of my life? Alfred Hitchcock knew it way before anyone, and the story I am about to share could very well be like a film by Alfred Hitchcock's famous film Psycho. I was newly married, and I knew at the back of my head that it was a decision that I had made in a real haste, and it was one of those decisions that I made on the impulse. We had been dating for just 3 months, and she proposed to me, and then I agreed because it was not every day a Charlize Theron-looking woman would propose you and want to get married. I wasn't really sure about the whole thing at first, but with time, I just made myself believe that it was for the best. I met my wife in London while I was on a work trip, and she was there visiting a friend. I had no idea that she was eyeing me that day in the club until one of my friends pointed it out. And before I would approach her, she came and asked me if she can join me and my friends with her and other friends, and I agreed. That was the first time we met, and from that moment, we started hanging out together a lot and officially went on a date after talking to each other for about a week. We had a lot in common, and it was something that made us very good together. And then, just out of nowhere, 3 months later, she decided that we should get married. I met her parents and she met mine, and things were arranged, and we organized a little ceremony in the little cottage house we bought in the States. It was a bit away from the city. We did not want the city to disturb our ideal life. I was working as the columnist and she was a designer, so we spent a lot of time at our house working and being with each other. We had a good life. It was fun and wonderful, and things were good here. Neighbors were pretty great, and we would have dinners with them, and it was a suburban paradise there, and we were having a game of it. It was all going good. The dinners were good. We had a great rep in the neighborhood, and my columns were mostly about the neighborhood I was in. We decided to hold dinner for some people in the neighborhood. It was a light party that we held on our first anniversary. We were pretty excited to celebrate our first party in the house, and moreover, it was the first time that we were holding so many people in it at the first party. It all started good with us, and people were coming in with gifts, and it was the first time that we had to be so formal. Just an hour into the party, it all got way more than we could have handled. Everything was out of hands. There were more people coming in. I had no idea that there were so many people in the neighborhood. It felt like we were having a college party, and it felt like it because there were too many people, and mostly, they all looked like they were in college, and things were getting out of hand. Almost half of our fridge was empty, and all the snack we had arranged was getting empty. And then I decided to call in the pizza place and order 10 pizzas for the rest of them. But as the people were crowding our place, me and Emily were getting anxious seeing so many people. And to get away from it, we decided to leave the party and get away from it, and close ourselves in the bathroom, and decided to have a shower together while we were at it. And as soon as we reached the bathroom, we saw our bathtub was filled with blood, and there was a lady in it, murdered in cold blood. Emily couldn't take it and passed out. I called in the police, and they arrived, and we all decided to cancel the party as it was too big to handle. And then the police arrived and questioned us and gathered evidence. They decided to ask everyone for questioning, everyone that was in the party, and there were many people that we didn't even know about. Police inquired one of the man, and he was apprehended and confessed to the killings. What shocked us and made us to move away from there was the fact that the man responsible for the killing was an ex of Emily's, and he was actually here to kill Emily out of revenge. Emily was traumatized from it for a while, and I helped her get over it. She had been scared of bathrooms ever since. I have to accompany her every time she has to go to the bathroom. I'm getting a bit over it. I'm currently typing this out at my workplace, which is in the garden area of a home improvement store. I don't work the cash registers, and my manager doesn't even let me water the flowers, so a lot of the time I actually have nothing to do. This results in me taking extremely long bathroom breaks where I just scroll through my phone. I know it sounds bad, but it's better than standing around trying to look busy. Today was no different. Nothing of interest was going on, and this is until my work phone buzzed at the same time as whoever was in the store next to me. This is important for later. After a few seconds, I saw that the guy in the next door had his hands stretched to the ground with his palm facing up. At first, I thought he'd run out of toilet paper and was asking for some more, but he just stayed silent. So I ignored him after that, but then he started moving that hand uncomfortably close to my leg. I immediately scooted away and prepared to leave the store. And once he'd realized that what I was doing, he got out of his stall before me after a few seconds of silence. Then I took a peek out from the gap in the stall door to see what the hell he was doing, and just like a scene from a horror movie, our eyes connected as he was barely an inch from the door and was trying to peek inside. My blood ran cold if you're wondering why I didn't immediately open the door. And because the guy out, it's because I really hate confrontation. I avoid it whenever possible, and I do my best not to draw attention to myself. I stood sideways by the door so he wouldn't be able to see me, and that's when the whispering started. I don't know what the first thing he said was, but it sounded like he was moaning. The next part was a bit more audible. He said something along the lines of wanting to see me more of my unflushed toilet paper. I was thoroughly disgusted. This guy was a complete creep. And I was alone in the bathroom with him. My heart was beating faster by the second. And I knew I had to stay there until another person came in, as there was no way I was going to confront him alone. Just then, probably a minute later, someone finally came in, and I took this as my chance to wash my hands and get the hell out of there. Thankfully, the presence of another person made the old man quit his creepy behavior. And as I was about to leave, he blocked my path for a quick second before stepping aside. The weird thing was, though I don't even think he works at the store, because he wasn't wearing any vest. My store is extremely lenient about uniform generally, but most workers at least wear a vest or something connected to the store. He just looked like a regular customer. I'm certain I heard 2 phones ding echo in that bathroom, and the phones have a signature ring to them, so it couldn't have been a coincidence. Either way, he only started creeping on me once the phone ring made it clear that I was an employee. The situation really creeped me out, and I've been totally unfocused on my work since then. I keep prowling the garden area to look out for an old man wearing a similar outfit to the creepier. And I have an incredibly hard time distinguishing faces, so I probably wouldn't even recognize him if I did see him. My mom travels a lot as part of her job, so she stayed in a whole bunch of different hotels. So she's on short flight from New York City to Toronto. And she gets talking to a guy who's in a similar kind of job, only he's actually from Toronto and had been visiting Manhattan on business. Mom thinks she can swoop in and undercut the deal he was getting, earning a bunch of kudos from her bosses in the process. So she gives this guy her business card and tells him to call her. They land and they say goodbye, and my mom heads off to her hotel for the evening. A few hours later, she's almost ready for bed when she gets a call from the hotel lobby saying my dad was there to surprise her, and would it be okay if they gave him a copy of her room key. Mom hadn't been expecting him, and the way she tells it, she was actually kind of angry that he'd apparently left a 6-year-old me with a sitter when I'd just gotten over chicken pox. So she calls to be like, "What are you doing, Paul?" Only my dad has no idea what she's talking about. He was at home taking care of me. And she could even hear me over the line to confirm if she tells Dad she'll call him back. And then heads down to the lobby to see when the world is going on. And who should it be waiting in the lobby pretending to be my dad? The guy she gave the business card to. As you can imagine, she was both freaked out and very angry. But she calmly explains to the concierge that the guy was not her husband, and that if he turned her again, he was to call the cops. The guy tried to play all innocent, acting like he was just picking up the wrong vibes from her or whatever. But he could have called her, he could have asked the reception to call her. There were a million different things he could have done if he thought she was just looking for some little work trip affair. She didn't do any of that. They just tried to talk his way into getting himself a freaking room key, presumably hoping he could catch my mom sleeping. Obviously, my mom was in no mood to sleep after the little encounter, and she remembers that she has a copy of this guy's business card too. She couldn't exactly call the cops, and the guy, since he hadn't actually committed any crime. But she could contact the company he worked for to maybe get him fired for being such a creep. But when she calls the number on the card, she discovers it's a dead number, and the company that's listed on the card that she eventually was able to get a hold of never even heard of the guy in question. The guy gave her a fake card, presumably just to get hers. He was never in the same business as her, but the fact that he managed to talk a good enough game to convince her is incredibly creepy to me. Like, there's only one thing scarier than an evil psychopath predator, and that's a smart one. Luckily, my mom was able to fly back the following afternoon after a business meeting, but it was definitely a close call, and I thank God she was able to get away safely. When I was 25, I made the biggest decision of my life. I decided to move across the country to go to grad school. Life on the East Coast in Virginia hadn't been great since I finished undergrad. I was working 2 dead-end jobs and a toxic relationship, and just generally depressed going from 4 amazing years of college to that. I planned out that trip weeks before leaving. I decided to take the round going through the middle of the country, passing through states like Tennessee, Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico. Since I didn't have any deadline on when I needed to arrive, I decided to drive 10 to 15 hours per day and stay wherever I ended up. I decided to find cheap Airbnb instead of pricey hotel rooms, but actually preferred a home feel of Airbnb ease to hotel rooms. My first day was the longest, driving 14 hours to Nashville. I got checked into my rental, got some barbecue, and fell asleep watching Breaking Bad. I hit the road early the next morning. The free feeling of driving cross-country is something I can't recommend enough to anyone. After driving for about 12 hours, I was feeling the stress of being behind the wheel for so long. I stopped for a coffee and to book my next day. I was an hour east of Oklahoma City, which had tons more options. But since I found myself nodding off, I figured it would be a safe bet to find something closer. As I scrolled through the app, I came across an entire cabin for $60 a night. The caption read, "Bob's Mountain Getaway." The cabinet itself looked simple. It had an aluminum sliding with a sheet metal roof. I wasn't looking for luxury since I was basically using the place to sleep. As I read through the description, something seemed off, as if the posters were trying too hard to make the place seem like a resort. I also thought to myself, this is eerily similar to those stories here about people getting murdered in a cabin in the woods. Having watched too many killer documentaries and movies, I decided to go ahead and drive to Oklahoma City and stay at a safer looking place. The rest of my trip was pretty normal. I'd never seen the mountains out west, so I was in awe with how rocky and how non-green it all was. Fast forward 2 years later, I'm out of grad school with a good job and a healthy relationship. I was listening to a true crime podcast called The Last Podcast on the Left. They had a segment where they read news stories about strange happenings. They read a news segment entitled The Eunuch Markers. Basically, these two men were renting a cabin on an LGBTQ app similar to Airbnb and offering services for gender reassignment surgeries. Mind you, these guys weren't doctors or even college educated. They were caught because one of the patients went to the ER due to a botched surgery. Curious, I Googled the story and started scrolling down, eventually to a picture of a cabin. It looked oddly familiar, and it took me a minute to realize why. It was the same cabin I saw on Airbnb 2 years back. I went through my phone to confirm because I remember taking a screenshot of it because of how creepy it looked. What makes things even more terrifying is that they were keeping the body parts after the surgeries in jars. They would grind them up to make sausages and other dishes. I'm not sure what sort of harm would have been felt me if I would have stayed there that night, but the thought of what was going on in the same place, I almost slept in the spine shelling. Take it from me. If you're ever in an area you're unsure about, always spend the extra money for your safety. Based in Richmond, Texas, 33-year-old Instagram influencer and freelance model Janae Gagne had the kind of lifestyle that many can only dream of having. Having amassed over 2 million followers on her various social media profiles, Gagne reported netted a 6-figure income as a result of her many sponsorship and endorsement deals. Using the pseudonym Mercedes, more Gagne's social media followers included the likes of Cardi B, Megan Thee Stallion, Snoop Dogg, and Meek Mill, meaning that by August of 2020, she was arguably one of the most famous social media influencers on the planet. Like many of her peers, being introduced to the website OnlyFans presented Gagne with a lucrative opportunity, interactive and more intimately with her gargantuan online following, while also opening up a potentially massive new revenue stream. But according to Jenny's father, Mark, the titanic amount of attention she received brought just as many problems as it did benefits. We kept her real private. Not even some of her friends knew her real name. They just called her Mercedes. I moved my daughter into new apartments 3 times because of my insecurities. He said late last year, the sheer number of people following her online, it scared me, he continued. Some of them followed her because they admired her, loved her even, but some were crazy obsessed. It was obviously unhealthy. So at around 4 p.m. on Sunday, August 29th of 2020, when Mark Gagne hadn't heard from his daughter for almost 48 hours, he decided to stop by her home in Cortland apartment to check on her. He pulled up, knocked on the door, but no one answered. Mark Gagne then pulled out his cell phone and gave his daughter a call, swearing he could almost hear it vibrating from inside. That's when he heard movement coming from inside the house. He hadn't heard from his daughter in days, and no one was answering the door to her apartment, so who was moving around inside? Mark Gagne said that he began to suspect something was horribly wrong. So in the next instant, he reeled back and sent his foot flying into the lock, kicking it open in one furious tant. The sight that greeted him instantly broke his heart. There was his beloved daughter, eyeing lifeless at the bottom of the stairs. Her apartment had been completely trashed, and there appeared to be lipstick graffiti all over the walls of the apartment. Before he had any chance to read any of it, Mark Gagne heard a noise coming from upstairs. Mark said that in the heat of the moment, he thought his daughter might have fallen down the stairs and broken her neck, but hearing something coming from upstairs had him bolting up that floor as fast as his legs could carry him. Only then did he see a man lying in a pool of his own blood, gurgling and choking with a knife stuck in his throat as the life slipped away from him. Mark demanded answers from the dying man, but it was too late. He passed away just moments after Jenny's father had broken into her home. He had a disturbing twist of fate. Mark Gagne won't be plagued by questions for very long, because after he called 911, began to read some of the lipstick graffiti that had been scrawled on the walls. "I was used for money. Real one piece. I should have stayed in Florida," read another. The final piece Mark read was, "I wish I never loved her. Sorry to the landlord and family." He couldn't bring himself to read any more. Although it appeared that his daughter's murder had been scrolling over the walls for days, he'd summed up a feeling and motive in just a few short sentences into Mark. It only confirmed that his worst nightmares had come to life. Janae Killer turned out to be a 34-year-old Florida man by the name of Kevin Ackerthrow, a man with such an unhealthy obsession with Janae that he somehow managed to track her down and kill her, all before taking his own life. He did not have any kind of prior arrest record in his home state, but during the subsequent investigation, police tried to establish that he'd had any prior history of mental health issues and don't even know how he found her. Mark Gagne later said, "A garden, my daughter. I won't even let her friends know where she lived." Police still don't know how or when he got to Texas. There's so much that's still a mystery. The news of her death was broke by a Canadian rapper, Tory Lanez, who paid tribute to her with a post that read, "Rest in peace, Queen." The few of the tributes seemed to address the causes for death. She was very cautious about her surroundings, Janae's mother and Jeanette Grover said, but unfortunate, they somehow basically was stalking and killed my baby. It's irrefutably horrific and important that Kevin Ackerthrow was able to track down and kill such an innocent young woman. But it's clear that Mark Gagne's fears were justified. No matter how much he tried to keep his daughter safe, the determination her stalkers showed and locating her significantly outweighed their efforts. And somehow, a man who wasn't exceptionally computer illiterate was about to somehow track down her home address. Some have speculated that the court somehow got a hold of Janae's billing information and discovered her real name and address in that way, in which case, OnlyFans had a long way to go before it can truly secure its content creators' privacy and security. So maybe until then, the risks of having an alluring online presence will outweigh any potential financial reward. I ordered a mystery box from an online shopping store. It was rather new and had this pure blind gamble kind of order where I can get mystery boxes arranged by strangers for a heavy discount, and it can be from any country anywhere in the world, and the package would be untouched, and no one except the sender and the receiver will know what's inside the box. And it was something that intrigued me very much, and I decided to go with it no matter the cost. And I still, I guess, have nightmares about the boxes. Some were really cool, but some were outright mental. I started collecting these mystery boxes, and these boxes, while some were filled with really cool stuff, some were filled with a hell lot of filth that I could have imagined. They had the filthy hairs and things that I would not mention over here, but in all the boxes that I had were really good. Like one time, I get this really cool antique that I got to sell on eBay. I got $500 for it, and I paid $12 for the box. But this story is not about the box that I enjoyed, but rather the box that I so much hope I shouldn't have ordered online. I have had the luck of getting best boxes for a while, and then there was this streak that I was very much confident in, and I thought that maybe the streak will continue. I have had made a profit of $1,200 up till now, and I was sure that maybe I will get more out of it. And I wasn't ready to accept that maybe this streak could end. But things were not going accordingly, and there was a new site that I hopped on, and it seemed untouched. So I decided to get in on, and I got greedy, and I ordered a set of 8 boxes. I had never got the 8 boxes together before, so I thought of getting them all together and hiked their price on eBay. It was the 8-box mystery set that was to be delivered to me from all the way from Argentina. The box was meant to reach me in 7 working days, but there were delays, so I waited for the box to arrive. I tried tracing the boxes, but there were no marks, no location that I can trace the boxes to. And then, days later, I got a pop-up message on the screen that said, "Do you really wish to receive the package? Once at your doorstep, you cannot turn them away." I just agree and decide to wait for the package. I was not fully aware of what was coming next, but I didn't realize that I was deeper into problems. I realized there were people following me, and they looked like suits. Definitely something was going on that I wasn't aware of, so I decided to cancel the order. I went back to the site to cancel the order, but there was no option to cancel them. I was getting worried as the order was nearing by, and there was this sense that I'm being watched. I wasn't aware of the implications that this order was bringing in. The worst, I thought, was maybe it is because of the fact that the box is coming from the foreign country, and maybe there'd be drugs in them. And then something happened that I was pretty sure that would happen. The guy in the suits knocked at my door, and it wasn't something I wanted. The guys came in and asked me, "You've been buying too many of them boxes, sir, and recently we've noticed that there is a shipment of 8 boxes that are coming your way, and we suspect that there might be a lot of drug component coming out of your way." And they further started their investigation. How many mystery boxes have you had your way during few months of your buying? Are you using it for peddling drugs? And then the guy were very stern about the whole thing, and they charged me, saying that I haven't been honest. So I just told them that I'm just getting good cash on eBay, and then I gave them the list of everything that I have purchased. Even though it was too weird for them, there was nothing that they found illegal. But they told me to keep an eye out for the new package and inform them as soon as it arrived. Then a week later, the boxes arrived, and then I decided to not mess with the boxes and instead call in the guy in the suits. I did as they said and called them, and they came in expecting that it might be drugs. But as they took over and started opening up the boxes, there were different body parts of a person in all 8 of them. And then they took them all for testing, and I was put to a surveillance. And then after days of interrogation and testing, they let me go. But they never told me whose body was it. Though I remember seeing a CIA badge in a mystery box, but I decided not to investigate it any further, and that was it. That was the end of my mystery box buying adventures. Some say he was in a house fire. The flames had gnawed the skin like an old candle. Others swore he was struck by lightning as a child and that the bolt head forked directly into the poor boy's face. The rumors that he looked the way he did because of some horrifying nuclear accident at the nearby Donetsk power plant. Men swore he was real. Others said that it was all a lie. But back in the day, almost everyone in the greater Pittsburgh area had heard some variation of the Charlie No-Face urban legend. Some called them the Green Man, others the Monster of Beaver County, but the details were essentially the same. Some older Pennsylvanian even claimed to have met Charlie No-Face when they were younger, saying it was by far the single most terrifying moment of their lives. They described it like shaking hands with a Jersey Devil or sharing a makeup mirror with a Powder and Bloody Mary. We thought it was impossible. But there it is. Clear as day, really is you and me, because Charlie No-Face was real. And the story is just about as terrifying and tragic as a person can imagine. On August 16, 1919, an 8-year-old boy named Ray Robinson was taking a walk with his sister and a few other friends out near New Castle, Pennsylvania. At some point, the children looked up to see a rather fetching bird's nest perched atop a nearby tree. Only, this tree happened to be dangerously close to an abandoned railway bridge. It's thought the children were engaged in an activity known as egging, in which children would cruelly steal birds' eggs in order to preserve paint or display them. But when Ray didn't know what was that just a year earlier, another boy had tried to climb the exact same tree and had managed to touch one of the exposed wires that still had a current running through it. The boy died a slow, painful death over the course of 2 weeks, and Ray was about to make exactly the same near-fatal mistake. A horrifying amount of current ran through his young body, so much those eyes, lips, ears, and nose were all hideously malformed, burned away completely. One of his arms was frazzled and rendered useless by the subsequent fall, while one of his hands was blown clean off of his wrist by the force of the electrical current. He went through an ungodly amount of pain suffering. But with the hard work of some top local doctors, little Ray Robinson miraculously survived. As you can imagine, Ray's life became extremely difficult after the accident, and not sure because of his injuries. Many of the larger Victorian-era homes in rural Pennsylvania, including the one Ray grew up in, really can be something to behold. The extravagant architecture include high ceilings, grand bay windows, and often the privacy of personal in-suite bathroom fixtures. In some cases, the level of domestic self-sufficiency meant that a person could remain in one isolated corner of the house for days, perhaps even weeks on end, as just as much as it could be used to provide a sense of comfortable solitude. Such features made for rather horrible gilded cages for people like Ray, and the South's family kept his monstrous form hidden away from the terrible public mile counts. Ray was kept isolated and shunned even by his own family. But he wasn't entirely mistreated during his upbringing. He was amply fed, and his love of baseball was indulged by parents that provided them with both baseball cards and a wireless radio with which he could listen to games. His parents also understood that he needed to keep busy, and also that they needed to teach him to function in society. They provided him with the means to learn Braille, and even taught him how to fashion Wallet's indoor mats that have used rubber tires. When he came of age, his family revealed a renovated apartment that made for him, sent into the family garage. It was much closer to them both physically and emotionally, and it meant the world to a young man who had been so terribly misunderstood for most of his young life. Only as he grew, a yearning to roam free burned in him. So in a small act of rebellion, Ray slipped out of the house in the dead of night and walked the highway near the family home. It became something of a habit. He enjoyed the feeling of the tarmac underfoot, the feeling of the breeze on the skin. After a while, he went from walking the highways once or twice a week to almost every night, always alone and always at night. And this is where the real-life Ray Robinson became a walking, talking urban legend. Most nights, on the rare occasion that a car did come along, Ray was so frightened by the sound of the oncoming engine that it scampered off the road and hid among the foliage. But after a while, he found he was unafraid of the roaring vehicles if he stuck to the side of the road. That didn't seem to bother him, so he made the decision to stop hiding. One day, Ray was walking along the highway when once again he heard the sound of an oncoming car. It unlike so many times before, and the vehicle had just rolled on by having not caught him in its headlights. Ray, or the screech of tires on the road behind him, A man cried out into the night, revving his engine the way that sounded a lot like reversing Ray spooked, bolted off the road and into the cover of some trees. Ray swore off his nightly walks for a while, but the damage was done, and in nearby Elwood City, rumors began to spread that the man with no face. The first sighting didn't cause too much of a stir. People just thought the storyteller was tired, crazy, or drunk. But after a few months, a second sighting of an obviously restless Ray Robinson caused something of a frenzy among the local townsfolk. People would scour the length of the Route 351 once the sun had set, desperate to confirm the rumors of Charlie No Face for themselves. But one by one, the people of Elwood found the rumors were all true. As one might expect, Ray's rather unusual appearances was the subject of equal parts fascination and revulsion. But for the most part, those that encountered him were not without compassion. People we began to offer him cigarettes or beer to amenities he had never had the fortune or misfortune to partake in, and like many of us, he found that he enjoyed them. It also seems that he was partial to having his picture taken, and as there are many confirmed photographs of Ray with smiling local arms around his shoulder, as if he was a beloved celebrity. Again, rumors spread that Charlie No Face likes beers and smokes, and the town folks would bring tributes to Ray on a nearly nightly basis, and this only further incentivized his nightly rambles down Route 351. But not everyone who sought him out had good intentions. According to some Elwood residents, Ray was attacked and beaten up on more than one occasion. One person even tells the story of how one particular cruel character filled a bottle of beer up with his own urine, shielded it, then gave it to the blind wanderer on one of his Moonlight Jonesy. Some would stop him, not for to give him a ride, then simply drive in the middle of nowhere and kick them out the car. Shocking, but not surprising, as anyone even remotely familiar with humanity might be quick to remind you. When older Elmwood residents tells the story of driving down Wallace Run Road late at night with his friends, they brought with them a case of beer, a straw, and some cigarettes, and their usual tribute to the Green Man. Although his friends had seen Charlie No Face before, our narrator had yet to have the pleasure. And when Rave Robinson finally presented themselves in the flesh, right in the seat next to him, the man said he was frozen in terror. Everything they said about him was true, and his face really was green. And as it turns out, there's a rather grim reason behind the discoloration, as Ray's nose was basically an open wound for his entire adult life, and as a result, he often suffered from quite dangerous infections, thus turning his space a slightly verdant woo. People need to understand, the resident was quoted as saying this was a human being, a real person, and someone who endured one of the most tragic lives I've ever encountered. Underneath it all was this beautiful, kind man. Somewhere, there exists a photograph of Ray Robinson posing with a woman. It's clear that she's happy, that she's unafraid of him, and the way she holds him speaks to the warmth that she has for a man she may never ever have met before. All based on a well-deserved reputation of being a kind and gentle spirit that wouldn't let her life-changing accident keep them down. There's also an interview with a man whose brother was killed in action during the Vietnam War. By his own admission, his fascination with Charlie No Face was a rather eccentric one, but he also credits Ray Robinson with helping through the darkest periods of grief he'd suffered so far. Ray wasn't just an urban legend, he was a real flesh and blood man, and a good one at that. Ray was living in an assisted living facility when he passed away in 1981, as grave as in the Grandview Cemetery located in 139 Norwood Drive in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania. And coincidentally, it's just a few plots away from the little boy electrocuted in the exact same manner, just a year before his own accident. Occasionally, someone comes along to put fresh flowers down in Ray's grave. It's not clear whether this is one person or many, but the message is clear. Ray's legacy lives on, but it's in the terrifying tales the man with no face on love that those who came to know him show. So here's the Ray Robinson, the urban legend who turned out to be very, very real, and who deserves the rest in the deepest and most heavenly peace.
So I was scrolling through the subreddit Creepy Encounters, and it reminded me of a story that happened to my twin sister and I about 2 years ago. We were 22, almost 23 when it happened, and as we'd moved to a different town to pursue our studies, we'd only come home for the holidays. It was a summer's evening, and our father wanted to cook us all something, but was missing a few things, so we all decided to go to a little grocery shop in the city centre. It was too late to go to a supermarket and a bit too far. My father didn't want to go too far for just a few things that were easy to find closer to home, if a bit more expensive. And when we got there, he stayed in the car and sent my sister and I in to get the things we needed. We were discussing which brand we wanted and the price, and an old guy, enough to have grandkids, interrupted us. He asked if we were twins, which is obviously a question we are used to hearing. So we smiled politely and answered that yes, we are twins. Cue the, "Oh, you look so alike" spiel. For the record, we don't think so. But we are used to each other, so we know all the differences between our physical appearance. Then the question followed, which one came out first? Which always makes me feel uncomfortable. But when they're nice, I try not to show my discomfort. But then this guy started asking if we had boyfriends, if we wanted to have children, and if we planned to stay together, etc. And it was starting to get creepy. But as I'm quite the introvert, I didn't say it outright, but did make sure to show it in my body language, that I was immensely creeped out. I turned away from him and looked at the cash register. He then started to say that he wanted to marry my sister, that her eyes were a mirror, and that he could see she is so kind and docile. Even if it was creepy, I couldn't help but laugh in disbelief, because really, my sister, kind and docile. She is actually so sassy and savage, and I love her for it. He said their children would be so beautiful, and at this point it was past being creepy, and I was getting really pissed. Why the fact that we are twins make him and other people in general think they can say things like that, or ask personal questions. I was also getting really annoyed because my sister and I are super protective of each other. I said that she was not going to marry him, and that it was absolutely creepy that a guy old enough to have grandchildren would say to someone potentially young enough to be his granddaughter that he wanted to marry her and have children with her. We got what we wanted, bought it and left, with the guy behind us trying to apologize and say that he didn't mean it like that. As we were walking out, still ignoring the dude, my sister told me that I should have just ignored him because he wasn't worth it. I don't think we told our dad, because we didn't want him to worry, even though he would have definitely agreed the guy was way out of line. He would have also said that we handled it properly by telling him off, then ignoring him and leaving.
I went to beauty school just after high school, so it's just learning what it is like to be an adult, work, go to school, and socialize at the same time. If you've ever gone to beauty school, you know the hours are pretty lengthy, and it's a lot of work in a short amount of time. You also know that you're mostly crammed with a lot of women of different ages, and a few boys if there's a straight man in school, and he's even mildly attractive, obviously considering you're attracted to that type of person. Most women that score just so at all because it's the only male person we are seeing during most of our weeks. That takes me to Dave. A few years older than me, tall, drives a Ducati to school, mysterious and handsome. Every girl was always putting a little extra makeup, turning their hips towards him, flirting when he was around. He was cute, quiet, and always knew what to say. I was as interested in catching his eye till he randomly asked me to meet up with him for a bite one day after school. I was single, needing to experience dating for the first time, and it didn't seem that bad to hang out with. Things started off very sweet and genuine. He'd sent good night texts, joke with me at school, and even genuinely seemed like he wanted to hang out more and more. We'd go to bars, and he knew everyone, so I could just get right in. I was underage at the time. We go eat, see shows to step drink. I feel like I was starting to feel like an adult enjoying the life and being wooed by a handsome, slightly older man. We drove around on his bike. He'd take me to nice, quiet dinners, always offered to pay, and even didn't little things like hold his arm out when I was walking downstairs or off a curb. I'd never experienced this type of gentleman before. But as quickly as the sweet dates came, so did a very weird, calculated, and controlling behavior. He would start to ask why I didn't smile with my teeth. Was it because I was embarrassed at myself? He would sit behind me working at school and taught me about how slow I was. He'd say things like, "Don't sit like that," or "Say things that way. That's not what ladies do, and I'm a lady, right? Don't wear that lipstick, it's trashy." Butts, I guess. Maybe I was being inappropriate. Maybe he's right. I should act more like an adult and a child. Be better at school. Look more like an adult. He brought me to his house one night, a place he rented a room from. Suddenly, this stoic Edward Cullen type turned into a person I didn't recognize. Outside of the random mood shift, his room was filled with clothing and garbage like old Gatorade bottles filling the floors. There was a TV and a bed. Of all the things I could really make out in the room, he brushed dirt off his bed for me to sit down. I hung out for a while, and he oddly confessed he never brushed his teeth. Okay, well, looking at this room, I could believe that. He also mentioned that he just bought new clothes when he needed them and never washed. The dirty ones just left them there. This is all in the first 2 or 3 weeks. Kind of a red flag if you asked me. The lights were off at one point, and we're watching a show, and I see a light like a cell phone right outside the window behind the TV. I jump and get his attention, but he had to have seen. He brushes it off, saying it must be a roommate though. I notice he's texting someone at the same time. Let it go for the night. Eventually go home, but so feel uncomfortable. When the phone calls started happening in the stories of his ex, they lived together. She was 10 years older than him and had a 6-year-old kid. She was crazy. If he and I would hang out, I'd suddenly start getting calls from an unknown number. The minute I walked in my door, they would ring to my voicemail. Got them. And no one would say a word till the message ran out of time. They'd happen every 10 minutes for 3 or so hours. I asked him about this, if it was him, and he said it may just be his crazy ex. But how would she have my number? He'd say, "Well, I have to give her some of her things, and she stole my phone at one point. Must have taken your number." So the gentlemanly dates would happen, and the gifts, sending roses and coffee to my work, showing up with a massage and spa packages every week. We still saw each other at beauty school, almost alien. He'd be kind, but it was always hush-hush until it was outside of school. I was torn. This person lying? Or is this the kind of person to want to date me? Maybe he just has some flaws and a crazy ex. Then the texts and Facebook messages started coming, clarifying it was her. He told me about your messed up life and secrets you've told him. I know he just saw you. I know you were at his house. I was outside his window looking in. Your red dress was nice. He laughs about you. Poor you. Just a stupid little girl. And stuff like that over and over. I block her. Then she'd have friends send me the same BS. She freaked me out. And he always denied it and apologized for her behavior. Then the word Daisy wouldn't show up for school, and he would text me during the day saying they were together, sending pictures of him. I tried to confront him, but he always denied having anything to do with her and repeating that she wanted to ruin his life. And then she started going to my work, telling my coworker she was my friend and would color things on the kids' menu, like my name plus Dave, art, her, and tell them she wanted me to have it. She'd send me a random picture of him in a booth at my work, and I put the pieces together when I got there and got her notes, asking my coworkers where she was sitting and what she looked like. It was gross and embarrassing, let alone scary. My car was broken into at school, and nothing was taken from it, but a bill that had my address on it. Then was so scared. I came home at any point in time, and she started calling me over and over as soon as I closed the door behind me. I felt trapped. She would call my work and school saying she was my mom and try to get more info on me, or call them as a customer saying to get me fired. My roommates finally kicked me out because they were rightfully freaked out. So I turned to the police. They put me in contact with a detective who I handled all of the calls, texts, and messages, plus notes she left in my work. I never answered the phone or responded to a single message from her. I had hundreds of calls, texts for at least a month. They came in every day from the same number. I never blocked that number after the first few were blocked, so I could keep a log of all the attempts. Plus, I have to keep a journal of every incident leading up to me coming to the police just in case. I watched a lot of crime documentaries. He told me that there was nothing he could do to trace the number back to a specific person, and since she hadn't threatened my physical safety, his hands were tied. The very next day, he calls me in, he's furious, telling me he can't help me if I'm harassing her back. I was confused, and when I asked what he meant, he said, "You're calling a mother non-stop throughout the night, terrifying her and her kid." But it was a 20-year-old, and she was 36. Of course he's going to believe the adult, but I never called her. He asked me to come to his office and show me his evidence he has against me. She forged him tons of texts, saying things like, "Well, I can't really say them here, but they were just toxic," which is full of malice, and I just broke down. I would never say some of the things that she had said that I said, and I know I didn't send these tons of texts, especially overnight when I had school the next day. He didn't believe me and completely dismissed me. He ultimately turned against me and was now on her side, and this was crushing. I broke things off for good with David, basically told him to screw off. We still had to go to school together, and he was terrible. I embarrassed myself in front of my friends defending him so long. My work, my school, who I had to beg to make sure this girl didn't come around again, and a detective who ultimately didn't believe a word I said, just to get some peace. My friends were tired of seeing me scared, stressed, and constantly talking about this weird situation happening to me. I was over it all. She finally left me alone once I moved, got a new car, a new phone, deleted social media. But it still freaks me out that we all live in the same town. She messaged me a few years ago from a different account when I was back on social media, and said she was sorry that she was manipulated by Dave and that they did this to too many girls. This was disturbing and gut-wrenching to me, to the mother of a 6-year-old, really have nothing better to do than play messed up mind games with a sociopath, maybe two sociopaths together.
Junko Furuta was born in Misato, Saitama Prefecture on January 18, 1971. She lived at home with her parents and her two brothers, one elder and one younger, and could often be found watching her favorite drama series, Tambu, whenever she wasn't studying. During her teenage years, she attended the Yoshio Minama High School and had a part-time job during after-school hours at a plastic molding factory. It was this job that helped her gain enough experience to be offered at an electronics retailer where she planned on working after she graduated from high school. She was also offered the job because of her almost flawless academic performance. She had an extremely high grades and very infrequent absences. She also saved up money from a part-time job so that she could go on a post-graduation celebration trip around the Japanese home islands. But Junko would never get to go on this trip, as she was about to have a hellish encounter with members of the Japanese criminal organization known as Yakuza. On November 25, 1988, a teenage boy named Hiroshi Miyano, joined by his friend Nobuhiro Minuta, was wandering around his hometown village of Masato with mischief on his mind. It was then that they spotted Junko riding her bike home after finishing her shift at the plastic molding factory. Together, they hatched a devious scheme. Nobuhiro suddenly gave chase and kicked Junko off her bike before being chased away by Hiroshi, who acted as the Good Samaritan and offered to walk her home in safety. The whole thing was a ruse disguised to win her trust, and it worked like a charm. Junko accepted the offer and followed Hiroshi, who said he knew a shortcut to the neighborhood she lived in. But unbeknownst to her, Hiroshi was leading her to a nearby warehouse, and once he let her inside, he told her he was a member of one of the world's most feared criminal organizations, the Yakuza. Hiroshi then told Junko that if she did not do everything she was told, he would have her killed. He then indecently assaulted her in the warehouse, then again in a nearby hotel, with Junko so terrified that she did not want to raise a peep to anyone she saw as they walked between the two places. While they were at the hotel, Hiroshi called his friends from the telephone there, bragging to them that he had procured his own personal plaything. The group of friends had a history of kidnapping girls and carnally attacking them, so his friends pleaded with him to share his new prize. Sickeningly, Hiroshi agreed. Just before 3 a.m. the following morning, Hiroshi forced Junko to follow him to a local park, where 3 friends of his were waiting for them. The boys went through Junko's belongings, finding that her home address was written on one of her notebooks. Now they had the ultimate leverage over her, claiming that if she disobeyed or tried to escape, a team of Yakuza hitmen would murder her mother, father, and brothers in the family home. Junko was then taken to an empty house owned by Nobuhiro's parents, where each of the boys took turns beating and defiling her. Junko believed every word of the boys' threat and took each beating without complaint, purely out of the love for her family, who by this point are becoming extremely concerned about her absence. On November 27th, Junko's parents contacted the police regarding her disappearance. Word went around town that she was missing, word that soon reached the boys who kidnapped her. They argued over letting her go or killing her and disposing of the body. And so one of the boys came up with an appalling, shrewd plan. With the same threats of having her family killed, they made Junko call her parents by phone, telling them she had run away, but was safe with friends and that the police should stop investigating her whereabouts. Whenever Nobuhiro's parents came over to check on their son, Hiroshi forced Junko to act like his girlfriend. But since Nobuhiro's parents were well aware of Hiroshi's status as a Yakuza and were terrified of him, it wasn't a pretense he had kept up for long. Nobuhiro's brother also seemed to be aware that Junko was being held captive and did absolutely nothing about it out of fear of the Yakuza reprisal. Junko was kept as a Yakuza prisoner for over 40 days and nights, and over the course of this period she was beaten, tortured, indecently assaulted by more than 100 other Yakuza members that Hiroshi had invited over. They starved her, hung her from the ceiling, and used her as a human punching bag. They dropped barbells onto her stomach, forced her to eat live cockroaches, and drink her own urine. She was also forced to dance and sing songs while being beaten before forced to commit numerous lewd acts. On some occasions, she was cut open and objects were inserted into the wounds, some of which included a lit light bulb and ignited fireworks. Junko was burned with cigarettes and lighters, and hot wax was stripped onto her eyelids to seal them shut. The boys also tore off her left nipple with pliers and pierced her breast with sewing needles. Whenever she passed out from the pain, the boys dumped her head in a bucket of cold water that kept her at the ready, keeping her awake so that the torture could continue. By the end of 40 days, Junko had been beaten so hard and for so long that her face was almost unrecognizable. And as a result of the repeated violations, she had become pregnant. 16 days into Junko's ordeal, Horishi invited a boy named Koichi Ihara around to the house. Koichi postured as a tough young prospective Yakuza, but was actually horrified by what he saw, how Junko was being treated. When it was his turn to violate her, Koichi found that he didn't have it in him to commit such an atrocious act. He was mocked by the other boys, who bullied him into going through with it, questioning his masculinity and telling him that if he didn't assault her, that he would be kept prisoner too, doomed to suffer similar treatment. Traumatized by what he'd seen and racked with guilt over the things he'd done, Koichi confessed his crimes to his brother as soon as he arrived back at his home. The police were soon contacted, and 2 officers were dispatched to the house where Junko was being kept a prisoner. When they arrived at the address, Hiroshi and Nubahuru played dumb, acting outraged that such an accusation had been made. They even had the gall to invite the officers inside to take a look around, calling their bluff in a way that seemed absolutely outrageous in retrospect. To the police officers, the invitation was all the proof they needed to believe that the 2 boys were telling the truth and that there were no crimes being committed inside the house. If they had bothered to search, Junko would still be alive today, as it is widely accepted that despite some serious mental trauma, she would have recovered from the wounds inflicted on her and gone on to live something of a relatively normal life. But as the month of December rolled around, Junko actually found the courage to sneak downstairs to the telephone to call the police. But to her horror, Hiroshi discovered her trying to summon help, smacking her away from the phone and slamming the headset down into the receiver. When the police dispatcher called back, Hiroshi apologized, informed them that the call was an accident, and told the police not to worry. Hiroshi was furious that Junko had attempted to contact the police and savagely beat her as punishment for the perceived offense. At one point during this particularly savage assault, Hiroshi doused Junko's legs with lighter fluid and set them on fire. Junko was in so much pain that she actually started having a seizure, but the boys believed she was faking it to gain sympathy and set her legs on fire all over again. It was about this point in her captivity that Junko reportedly asked her captors to kill her so that her suffering might be over with, but they mocked her for this request and refused, thinking of more imaginative ways to torture her, such as forcing her to sleep outside at night when temperatures would dip below 0. Somehow, despite being on the verge of death, Junko didn't die of hypothermia. But by the time the torture got that severe, it was having a catastrophic effect on her body. Weeks of abuse had caused Junko to lose control of her bladder and bowels, but she was only beaten harder when she urinated on the floor. She was also rendered incapable of drinking water or consuming food, and would vomit profusely after each attempt. But again, instead of slowing down or attempting medical aid, Hiroshi and his minions only beat her harder from making a mess. Such sustained beatings and torture also had a horrific effect on her personal appearance too. Her face became so swollen that she barely resembled a human being anymore, and her body was so crippled and affected from untreated wounds that she started giving off a sickly, rotting scent that caused Hiroshi and his friends to lose any kind of carnal interest in her. On January 4th, 1989, after a humiliating loss during a game of Mahjong, Hiroshi hurried to take his frustrations out on Junko. Taking place over the course of 2 hours. This was perhaps the most brutal, sustained, and cruel beating that she had ever been subjected to, and the details are honestly not worth going into. Given how vile the previous assaults on Junko were, you can imagine how despicable this last one was. And as a result, Junko finally succumbed to her wounds and died later that day. When the boys discovered that she was dead, they wrapped her body in bed sheets and stuffed what remained of her into a travel bag. They then shoved her body into a 55-gallon drum and poured wet concrete into it, driving the drum out into a suburb of Tokyo before dumping it in a secluded area. A few weeks later, on January 23rd, Hiroshi was visited by Japanese police officers and arrested. But as it turns out, this is for an assault on a different girl than Junko, one that had occurred back in December of the previous year. The officers then bluffed Hiroshi into thinking that they knew he committed more serious crimes, and out of the blue, he suddenly confessed to the killing of Junko and told them where they could find her body. Horrified by the impromptu confession, the police drove out to the secluded spot that Hiroshi had described and found the steel drum that contained Junko's body. Her hands were so badly burned that she couldn't be identified by her fingerprints. So many of her teeth had been knocked out that the police initially didn't think she could be identified by her dental records. But a partial match turned out to be enough to confirm that the body did in fact belong to the missing Junko Furuta. In light of the fact that they were juveniles at the time of the offense, the identities of all those confirmed were kept a closely guarded secret by the Japanese courts. However, outraged by the severity of the crime, journalists worked hard to uncover their names and subsequently published them in the national newspapers. The reasoning was that no one who could commit such horrific acts of carnal violence deserved to remain anonymous, and that they should be named and shamed for the horrendous things they've done. Not only did Hiroshi Miyano deny that he'd actually murdered Junko, only pleading guilty to the crime of committing bodily injury that resulted in death, but when he was finally convicted of murder in July of 1990, he actually appealed the sentence. Appalled by such a juvenile and cowardly display from Hiroshi, Tokyo's High Court Judge Ryuichi Yanase not only denied the appeal, but gave Hiroshi an additional 3 years on top of his original 17, publicly scolding him for his apparent lack of remorse. During Hiroshi's trial, the High Court judge commented that exceptionally grave and atrocious violence had been inflicted upon the victim, and that Junko Furuta had been murdered so brutally that her soul must be wandering in torment. Upon hearing the details of the brutal assault and torture that ended her life, a spectator in the gallery actually passed out from the shock. Junko's mother also reportedly had a complete mental breakdown when she learned of her daughter's treatment, which required intense psychiatric treatment to overcome. Hiroshi's parents were so ashamed by the whole ordeal that they sold their home and donated the fee of almost $500,000 to Junko's mother and father. Junko's funeral was held on April 2nd, 1989. One of her friends read a memorial piece that stated, "Jun-san, welcome back. I have never dreamed that we would see you again in this way. He must have been in so much pain. There must have been so much suffering. The traditional coat we all made for the school festival looked really good on you. We will never forget you. I have heard that the headmaster has presented you with a graduation certificate. So we graduate together, all of us. Jun-chan, there is no more pain for you now. No more suffering. Please rest in peace." The electronics retailer that was due to give Junko a job upon graduation presented her parents with a uniform that she would have worn during her employment, along with sincere condolences. They placed the uniform in her casket, saying it's what she would have wanted, given how proud she was that she'd secured such a prestigious position at such a young age. What happened to her is something that the Yakuza subject young women to far more regularly than will ever be publicized. You get that the Yakuza are still romanticized in a similar way of how the Italian-American mob had been idealized in the past. We must be cautious not to put criminal organizations on the pedestal, and we must be quick to remember that it might have been our own sisters or daughters that were subjected to such horrendous treatment by men who saw Junko little more than an object that he toyed with, then disposed of. May she and all of the victims of wanton criminal violence obtain the peace and death that was denied to them in life.
On November 16th of 2004, 64-year-old that Mitra Simjanos had disappeared after visiting a meat market in her hometown of Kashava, North Macedonia. Just less than 2 months later, on January 12th of the following year, police found her dead body. She had been strangled, bound, tortured, and violated, but had only been dead for about 2 weeks, meaning she'd been kept prisoner somewhere and continually tortured for quite some time. Almost 3 years later, in November of 2007, 56-year-old Beat Sela Kaska disappeared while walking almost the exact same route as the murdered Mitra. She too was found early the following year, having received very similar treatment to Mitra. Then, May of 2008, 65-year-old Zivaza Tamil Kaska received a call saying that her son had been hospitalized. She disappeared on her way to the hospital, and it was later revealed that her son was in picture-perfect health. Her body was found a few days later. Unlike the previous 2 victims, she had been bound with telephone cords before being tortured, violated, and strangled. Macedonia police were reportedly mystified by the murders, and there was a complete lack of cooperative forensic evidence at the scene, meaning the killer had no previous convictions, and the only connections between the 3 women was that they were all employed as cleaners for a collection of different temp agencies. Aside from that, there was no motive, no evidence, and no way of knowing who the killer might be. It most certainly made for an interesting case, and as word spread among the people of Kishavel that they had potential killer in their midst, panic began to set in. The murders had also gained the interest of a 56-year-old journalist named Vlado Tanaski, a veteran reporter who spent his career at 2 of Macedonia's most prestigious newspapers, and Milana began his own private investigation into the murders, detailing his work in a series of articles that were published in the likes of Nova Macedonia and New Trinsk Vink. The Macedonia public were gripped by the articles, and for a while, it seemed as if Vlado might actually uncover the identity of the man they called the Kidshare Vault Monster. To them, Blanco was a hero, with the articles turning him into a national sensation and reviving what had been a floundering career. But it was during a read of one of the articles that a Macedonia homicide detective noticed something strange. Indeed, the articles were superbly written and pinpoint accurate, yet to the detective, they seemed a little too good. Vlado was privy to a level of detail that could only have come from actually reading the case files, and sharing such documents with a journalist constituted either gross incompetence or possible corruption amongst the presiding officers. An extensive investigation was undertaken, but the source of the leak couldn't be found. In fact, informal security surrounding the investigation was positively airtight. And that's when it occurred to one officer that there was a second explanation to why Vlado knew so much about the murders. One they had to explore, no matter how unthinkable it was. In January of 2008, Vlado received a visit from a pair of homicide detectives who wished to discuss his articles with him. He was only too happy to answer their questions, believing his work was actually helping them catch the killer. And in a way, that's exactly what happened. Because when the police asked Vlado how he knew that the killer had used telephone cord to find his victims, the journalist fell silent. It was explained to him that only the investigating detectives were aware of this piece of information, and unless he could point the finger at the collaborating officer, Vlado had some serious explaining to do. When he failed to account for where such knowledge had come from, the police asked him to provide a DNA sample for use in the ongoing investigation. They assured Vlado that it would be used to rule him out of the investigation, and then, if he had nothing to hide, he had nothing to worry about. But Vlado did have something to hide, because when law enforcement compared Vlado DNA to a sample taken from the victim's corpse, it came back a match. The police had finally discovered the identity of the Kashava monster, and was flooded with Jinsky himself. Following the Vlado arrest, the police built up a picture of the man who Sharp the client had driven him to violent insanity, and the 18 months before the first murder took place, Vlado's father had taken his own life. His mother accidentally overdosed on prescription medication, and he was laid off from his job. On top of that, he and his wife apparently separated when she moved to the Macedonia capital of Skopje. Police then moved to search the Tenacity's family's holiday home, a cottage in the countryside that they often summer. That it was there, the police uncovered a huge cache of adult material, ropes, and cords, which they used to tie to victims, and items belonging to the women Vlado had killed. Yet in a bizarre twist, police also discovered that Vlado's mother had been employed as a cleaner for most of her adult life, the same profession shared by his victims. This made for an extremely chilling addendum to the investigation, opening up the possibility that Vlado had suffered a complete mental break and had targeted the women because they resembled or even smelled like his mother. The salsa suggested that he'd had a fraught relationship with her, something his wife and friends said they were almost totally unaware of. Macedonia police were also planning on questioning Vlado regarding the disappearance of 73-year-old retired cleaner Gorsia Pavleshi, which had occurred on May of 2003. But following his transfer to Tetovo prison, Vlado was found dead in his prison cell on June 23rd. He had apparently drowned himself in a plastic bucket of water, his only means of taking his own life. It was an anticlimactic end to a story that had rocketed Macedonia society. The idea that a man was so desperate for the respect and admiration of his peers that he would literally kill for it, and that somehow, in the course of his violent campaign of murder and deception, he ended up targeting women that reminded him of his own mother.
This was a few years ago, just after I'd left college. I'd been working at Walmart for a while before moving to the customer service counter. My first holiday season was almost my last. After experiencing the post-Christmas returns period, I'd threatened to quit if my boss didn't move me out. Thankfully, she relented and I was given my own department. That's where I would stay until the next year's returns rush. I was doing my regular thing in electronics when my boss came to me for a favor. One of the girls scheduled to work customer service had just quit on the spot. She couldn't spare anyone else, and she knew I'd worked there before. I told her no before she could even finish, but she continued to beg. As one last desperate move, she offered to give me New Year's Eve and day off. It was an offer too good to refuse, and I reluctantly agreed. In spite of the desk being backed up to the doors, my fellow coworker and I were blowing through the line fast. People seemed to be a bit nicer than they had the previous year. That was until I began assisting this unkempt-looking man. He had a car seat for a toddler that he wanted to return. The guy seemed a little out of it. I had asked him twice about the receipt before he pulled this crumpled piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to me. I unfolded it and began the refund process. As I took the seat from the counter and sat it in a nearby basket, I made a passing comment to a coworker about the guy returning it because he needed to get high. It was just something that I expected from the area, something to that effect. I know it was in bad taste, but my coworker laughed and I returned to the counter to give the guy his money. He was staring a hole through me and gritting his teeth. He said, "I heard that. I'd watch your back if I were you." I could tell he meant business. I didn't want to draw attention, so I apologized under my breath and quickly handed him his money. Before he was able to say anything else, I called for the next customer. He reluctantly stepped away but remained close by, continuing to give me a death stare for several minutes. There was something about the look that terrified me. Although I kept working, a feeling of nausea boiled in my guts until he finally left. The next 3 hours dragged by, and because of the incident, my mood had taken a drastic downturn. I was overjoyed to see it end, but terrified of what may await me outside. There was no way I was going to my car alone. I went to seek out a coworker that I'd been dating on and off for a while. He agreed to walk me out to my car, and we stopped just inside the doors to look out. I didn't see the guy, so we continued on. The two of us stopped again briefly, but there was still no sign of him anywhere. Customers were coming and going, driving by us. Nothing looked off, and we headed across the lot to my car. I was relieved and beginning to think that I had just been overreacting. I knew it was a stupid thing to say, but I didn't know what the outcome would be. Then a car came out of nowhere and began racing up from behind us. The headlights were blinding, and I just began to panic and I froze. And if it wasn't for my companion, I may have been run down. He pushed me between two cars, following close behind. As the car sped by, the driver hurled a disgusting name at me and disappeared onto the access road. I thanked my hero and slowly got back to my feet. He insisted that we call the cops, but I refused. As stupid as it may sound, I was afraid involving them could cost me my job. But allow me to explain. I've been chewed out for being rude to customers before. I would have to explain why the man was so angry to me. If my boss heard what I'd said, I'd definitely lose my promised 2 days off and probably be fired. Rightfully so, I guess. Of course, I could lie and play dumb, but that never works out in the end. I decided to wager on the chance that he was done with me and would move on. And that turned out to be the case, fortunately. Various coworkers continued to walk me to my car after that shift. 2 months passed before I figured I was safe and returned to going solo. To this day, I've not seen that man again and hope never to. Whether I just got lucky or he never intended to kill me, I'll likely never know. Either way, I'm just happy to be alive. My attitude towards strangers changed after that incident, and for the remainder of my time working directly with customers, I made a concerted effort to treat them with respect. I suggest you take this story to heart. We may all have our little episodes of disrespect when dealing with our fellow person. Nobody's perfect. I'm definitely not. But keep in mind, however, you never really know what a stranger is capable of. One arrogant little slip could cost you your life.
Every once in a blue moon, I like to log on to the deep web and search for weird and strange things. In general, it's a relatively tame place. All the stories you hear about red rooms and hitman are bold 99% of the time, and these sites you see covered on YouTube are just FBI and other various law enforcement agency honey traps set up to capture criminals and stupid kids looking to score online. The majority of the trafficking taking place on the deep web these days is insider leaking information to journalists and pervs sharing lewd photos of kids. Yes, there are many other uses for it, but the virtual anonymity of the platform allows these behaviors to thrive. I would like to make it clear, I wholly support whistleblowers having a safe place to pass on information they might have, by the way, but obviously not the illicit stuff that people do on there. And the story that I'm about to share occurred in my early days surfing the deep web. I had heard all the stories and was eager to see how real they were. Like others, I was a little disappointed in what I'd found. The raciest place I'd come across was a picture and video forum that was heavy on the adult stuff. I guess the best description of it is a deep blue X-hamster crossed with live leak. Everything was allowed as long as it was legal, so the kid stuff was banned. Thankfully, the adult videos were the main reason I was there, not gonna lie. A lot of the other members traded their homemade videos and pictures between one another, and I enjoyed checking those posts out. Most of the modern mainstream adult movies are a little degrading to the actresses, but I discovered the amateur stuff was not pretty vanilla, actually has made them much easier for me to enjoy. It may have been my third or fourth time I visited the site when I got a private message from another member. I wasn't sure why he chose me or even how he knew I was there at the time, but I read it anyway. He said he was a moderator and noticed I've visited multiple times but had not shared anything. Apparently, the sharing thing will not require was highly encouraged. He wanted to know if I had anything to share. Basically, I've never been the kind of filming myself doing it. However, I didn't want to cause any trouble. After thinking about it for a minute, I remember I had a few photos of my ex-girlfriend's older sister she had sent me. Don't ask. And so I sent those 30 minutes later. He sent a second message. He sounded pleased with the pictures and had a few files I could download. Despite being grateful, I was a bit leery of downloading something from a stranger, but my curiosity got the best of me. The first few videos were pretty average yet enjoyable. However, The next was a bit unsettling. The video started with a close-up of a woman's leg wearing a spiked heel, and then it pulled away to show a kitten laying on the floor. This confused me for a second, but when the woman raised her leg and stomped on the kitten, I spent the next several minutes weeping uncontrollably. Being a massive animal lover, this kind of garbage horrifies me. Call me a child all you want, but there was nothing appealing about this. The tears eventually gave over to sheer anger, and I sent a venom-laden message to this idiot voicing my distaste for his joke. I let my anger get the best of me, and I foolishly threatened to send them to the cops. Looking back on this now, it was an empty threat. The cops wouldn't likely be able to find the guy or really care. After witnessing what I had, I stayed off the deep web for about a month. When I did return, I noticed a new message from the guy that sent me the horrible videos. I was reluctant to read it at first, kind of wanted to move on and put it behind me. But another part of me wanted to see the justification for thinking I'd like that garbage. Ultimately, I made the right choice, or maybe not, it depends on perspective. I guess what I would read I was not expecting for some reason. He got into his head that I didn't belong on the forum, and he wanted to drive me away. My mistake was threatening him. He must have foreseen this, and he suggested I search my hard drive. He claimed he had hidden a file within the download that had enough CPU to put me in prison for a long time. This left me with no defense. A search on my hard drive uncovered an unknown file that I didn't recognize, and it was indeed a massive file. Although it may have been nothing, there was no way I was going to take the chance of infecting my computer with this filth.
Rebecca Lucille Schaefer was born in Eugene, Oregon on November 6, 1967. Her father, Dr. Benson Schaefer, was a child psychologist, while her mother was a writer and instructor at Portland Community College. Given how proud she was of her Jewish roots, young Rebecca would dream of becoming a rabbi. But after a chance encounter with a modeling agent, she began modeling clothes during her junior year in high school. Rebecca would become a popular subject of many photographers, and she made guest appearances, department store catalogs, and television commercials, as well as an extra in a straight-to-TV movie. She was so successful that in August of 1984, her parents gave her permission to move to New York City to pursue a full-time modeling career. At 5'7", she was considered too short for high-fashion modeling jobs and struggled to find work as a result. Rebecca even moved to Japan for a short stint in the hopes of finding work there, but found Japanese modeling standards were even stricter than back in the United States. Yet, within just a few months of moving back to New York, Rebecca landed her first TV role playing Amy Barnes in ABC's One Life to Live. The following year, she appeared on the cover of 17 magazine, which caught the attention of television producers who were casting for a sitcom called My Sister Sam. Through a series of grueling auditions, Rebecca won the role of Patricia Russell, and the series was initially a hit, but it was canceled halfway through its second season in 1988 due to failing ratings. The role established Rebecca's acting career and earned her several other roles in a variety of different productions. However, the role also brought her to the attention of an extremely dangerous and unstable young man, one that would have an indelible and catastrophic impact on her life, Robert John Bardo. The youngest of 7 children, Bardo was the son of a non-commissioned officer in the United States Air Force who had met his mother whilst deployed in Japan. Due to the nature of his father's occupation, the Bardo family moved frequently, eventually settling in Tucson, Arizona in 1983. And to say young Robert had a rough childhood would barely broach the issue. A young Robert was placed in foster care after abuse from one of his siblings got so bad that he threatened to take his own life. Couple that with the Bardo's family history of mental illness, and it's quite clear that he never really had a shot at emotionally stable adulthood. By the age of 15, Bardo had been institutionalized to treat severe emotional problems, and it was around then that he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Shortly after, he dropped out of Pueblo Magnet High School and began working as a janitor at a Jack-in-the-Box restaurant. By the time he was 19, he had been arrested 3 times for disorderly conduct. Bardo's neighbors would frequently complain that he exhibited unexplainably strange and threatening behavior towards them. Yet, it seems they had no idea how deep Bardo's madness extended. You see, Bardo had a dangerously obsessive personality and found himself increasingly obsessed with certain female celebrities. The first target of his dangerous obsession was with the 13-year-old Samantha Smith, an American schoolgirl, peace activist, and child actress from Manchester, Maine, who became famous during the Cold War after her death on August 25, 1985, Bar Harbor Airlines Flight 1808 plane crash. Bardo was devastated, but it was during a period of intense mourning that he discovered Rebecca Schaefer while watching My Sister Sam. After writing Rebecca numerous letters confessing his love for her, Bardo attempted to gain access to the set of My Sister Sam, who was turned away by security. It was then that Bardo turned to a terrifyingly creative method of discovering Rebecca's whereabouts. Bardo contacted a Los Angeles-based private detective agency, promising to pay them handsomely if they could obtain the address of one Rebecca Schaefer. Using the California Department of Motor Vehicles records, the private detectives successfully obtained Rebecca's address, passing it along to Bardo for a tidy sum. They had no idea how unhinged Bardo was, or what the ramifications of their actions were. They were soon to find out just how irresponsible they had truly been. On July 18, 1989, Bardo drove to Los Angeles to confront Rebecca at her home. He was angry because she hadn't bothered to reply to any of his letters. But not only that, he was furious because she appeared in a raunchy love scene in the movie scene from The Class Struggle and Beverly Hills. Bardo allegedly told Rebecca that she'd lost her innocence, and then in partaking in such an impure movie scene, had become just another Hollywood harlot. He entered this bizarre tirade by assuring her that he was a big fan. Now all he wanted was the best for her. Rebecca was terrified and told Bardo she wanted nothing to do with him, slamming the door in his face and rushing to call the police. They assured Rebecca they'd come over to her as soon as they could. But the situation wasn't an emergency at the moment, and no lights or sirens were rushing to her apartment. In the meantime, a heartbroken Bardo walked over to a nearby diner to get some breakfast. His plan to win over Rebecca had failed, but he also had a plan B, which he would use in the event of Rebecca's rejection. About an hour later, Rebecca's apartment doorbell rang again. Assuming it was the cops, she rushed over to answer the door, but when she stopped to open it, the only person she saw standing before her was Robert Bardo. Bardo raised a Ruger 357 handgun and shot Rebecca through the heart. He then tossed a copy of Catcher in the Rye into her apartment and was later arrested in Tucson while wandering through traffic. The following year, Bardo tried to argue that he was criminally insane, but a judge dismissed the idea and labeled him a dangerously obsessive but otherwise mentally competent person. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole and is currently serving his sentence at California's Avenue State Prison. As a consequence of Bardo's actions and his methods of obtaining Schaefer's address, the U.S. Congress passed the Driver Privacy Protection Act, which prohibits the State Department of Motor Vehicles from disclosing the home addresses of state residents. Rebecca's murder also prompted the first anti-stalking state laws, including the California Penal Code 6469, which was essentially the nation's first law against obsessive or fixated persons. It was a nice gesture, but few deny that they came too little, too late for Rebecca, who needed protection from a dangerous and violent stalker long before there were any legal means to combat them. We can only hope these laws are direct and robust enough to stop the same thing from happening again. But given the determination of the human spirit, that seems like wishful thinking indeed.
I had always been interested in the cultures and people of other countries and used to download apps that could allow us to talk to people all over the world. At the time, I was in the college pursuing my graduation from arts. My classes were only on weekends, so I had plenty of time, which I mostly used over the internet, talking to my friends around the world. One day, I came across an app, and its name was Bottled. It was a pretty interesting app. You had to write a message, placed it in a bottle, and throw, and someone across the globe would receive your message. I was enjoying it and making new friends. That was when I met a guy named Daniel. We started chatting. He was a pretty friendly and interesting guy. I became friends with Daniel, and we started chatting on a regular basis. After some time, we shared WhatsApp numbers and started talking there. One day, all of a sudden, he asked me, "How would you feel if someone pulls your hair by force?" I was shocked by the question, but replied calmly, "I would hate it. I would want to punch that person in the nose." He sent some laughing emoji in the reply. His next message was, "I really like you. Can I tell you a secret about me?" I replied, "Sure, you can." I love watching people in pain. I was confused and shocked by his message. I asked him what he meant by that, when he told me that he fantasizes about torturing people he hates with various methods. I did not reply to his messages, but he still continued. He told me about his fantasies, about how he wanted to beat up a boy he hated from college. He then told me how he sometimes even wants to murder people. After sharing me dozens of long texts, he asked me if it's right for him to fantasize such things. I thought maybe he's just lost and angry with the people who hurt him. So I tried to persuade him by explaining to him that no matter how angry you are, you should never harm another living being. And it's wrong to hurt others even if they wronged you. There was no reply for a few minutes. Then his reply came. "Okay, I understand. I would try not to think about these things." I replied with a smiling emoji, and then we started talking normally. After a few days, when I came back from the classes and I opened my phone, I saw Daniel had messaged. He had shared me a picture. I downloaded the picture, and it was of a boy who was brutally beaten. His eyes were dark and bloody. There was punching marks all over his body, and blood was dripping from his lips. I threw my phone on the bed. I stood there frozen for a second, and then went back to check my phone again. There was a message from Daniel. It said, "How is it? He is the boy who bullies me. I hate him." I asked him why he did that after I told him not to. He replied that it wasn't his fault and the boy started it by pushing him. He was going into the bathroom when the boy pushed him and cussed him. Daniel lost his cool and kicked him from behind, and then grabbed the broom from the corner and started hitting him. After that, he punched him continuously in his face until the boy passed out, and then he left the bathroom. He was telling me as if he enjoyed doing that. So I asked him to confirm. How did it feel putting someone through that? You know it's wrong. He replied, "I know that it's wrong, but trust me, it felt pretty damn good beating his sorry ass up." I did not know what to say. After a while, his message came. "I'm sorry. I know it's wrong. I will never do it to another person. It's just that I hate him so much." I asked him why he sent me the picture, and he replied, "I love you, and I want to share my everything with you." I did not say anything in response to that text except okay. I did not talk to him for the next few days, but he kept messaging me every day. I saw the last message through the notification, which said that I should not ignore him or I will regret later. The next day, he sent me a video. I wasn't going to, but I opened it out of curiosity. I downloaded and played the video. There was a girl sitting on a chair. She was wearing a blindfold. The room was dark. The only light was above the girl's head focused on her. After a few seconds, a boy came from behind. He was wearing a mask. He removed her clothes one by one, leaving her only in her undergarments, and tied her hand behind the chair. The girl giggled, and then the boy started kissing her, through the chest to her neck. She started moaning. I thought he had shared me a porn. I was about to close the video, when the boy suddenly grabbed a pot from behind and poured hot melting wax over the girl's head. She started screaming and died instantly. It freaked me out, and I immediately closed the video. There was a message below the video which said, "I imagined it was you." I instantly blocked him and started panicking. He was right. I was regretting it. I was regretting ever talking to him. I thought of reporting it, but I had no idea how. There was another friend of mine from the same country, so I texted her asking if she would help me report a crime. She agreed. I shared all the screenshots along with the video to her. The next day, she told me that she had reported the crime anonymously because she did not want to get further involved in this. After a few days, she shared me a news clip which said Daniel was arrested for the crimes of murder and assault of multiple victims. I uninstalled Bottled app from my device and stopped making more friends. I was raised over in Little John Island back in Maine. John has a small community of about 100 people just off the coast near Yarmouth. Technically speaking, it's long been incorporated into Yarmouth Township, and all the island kid bus across the bridges to the high schools there. But try telling that to the islanders. We never say we're from Yarmouth when people ask where we're from. We answer Little John every time. Maybe it's the fact that we're cut off by the ocean. Maybe it's just the people who live there. But this strong sense of togetherness and independence on Little John, kind of like a siege mentality only without the siege. As I said, the island kids used to catch the bus across the Talbot Road and the Sandy Point bridges in order to get to school, which included me. It just so happened that my favorite teacher, Coach Collins, was also an islander, and he was my favorite teacher for two reasons. Not only did he teach history and coach the senior ice hockey team, but he was just an all-around nice guy too, and used to give me a ride home after practice. Since walking home during a Maine winter night can almost be downright dangerous, Coach Collins was the kind of guy that kids like me really looked up to. He almost turned pro after playing hockey in college, won a Bronze Star in Vietnam, and unlike many of his colleagues, in a way of talking to his students that made you feel like he was your cool uncle or something. He was the best. No one had a bad word to say about him, and for a long time, Coach Collins occupied some mythical status in the town's collective consciousness. So it's March 7th, 1989. I remember the exact date because Dino Ciccarelli was traded from the Minnesota North Stars to the Washington Capitals. He was the outlaw hockey player for a while, a complete jerk, but God could he shoot a puck. And it was all we talked about at practice at night. Then in the middle of practice, I looked and see my girlfriend's best friend Kelly standing at the edge of the ice. She starts calling me over, and when I get a chance, I skate over to see what she wants. Kelly tells me that my girlfriend wanted me to call her as soon as I got home. From the way Kelly was acting, I knew it wasn't going to be good news. Consequently, I'm totally distracted for the rest of practice. My shooting sucks, and I'm in a stinker of a mood. By the time it comes for Coach Collins to give me a ride home like usual, he does his regular approachable patriarch routine. He talks, he dishes out some wholesome advice, and suddenly I'm not catastrophizing so much anymore. I thank him, go inside, call on my girlfriend, and what are you now? She wants to break up. Coach's advice sort of stopped me from having a full-blown teenage heartbreak moment, but I was still upset. Only I couldn't just sit around eating ice cream and feeling sorry for myself. That was masculine upset. I was troubled, so to speak. I figured I'd steal one of my dad's beers and go for a walk in the woods, maybe stand out on Madeline Point looking all broody and such. So that's exactly what I did. Looking back on it, it was just puppy love, no big deal. But as I said, it bruised my ego enough to feel like heartbreak, and that's all that mattered, I suppose. Either way, I found myself wishing I could talk to Coach Collins about it again. A guy like that had seen and experienced so much, and he still managed to come home and start a happy, functional family. He'd know what to say. He'd know what it was I had to do. I'm almost a Madeline Point, and I'm right where there's a kind of fork in the dirt road, One way leads to the water. The other is the overgrown driveway of a long abandoned house. Now the sun hasn't quite set by that time, and there's still a little bit of that blue twilight in the sky, and it gives the rotting old structure this awesomely creepy vibe. So creepy, in fact, that I almost soiled my pants when I heard some car horn let out the short, sharp horn from somewhere real close by. I had no idea anyone else was around. The whole point of walking out that far towards Madeline Point was so I could be on my own. And since the place was normally deserted during the drizzly Maine springtime, I was kinda spooked that anyone was there at all. But by that point, I'm a little buzzed and naturally curious, so I started cautiously padding off down the overgrown driveway, trying to find the source of the honk, when I finally saw the truck that seemed to be parked deliberately out of sight among the trees. I couldn't believe my eyes. Remember how I said I wish I had Coach Collins to talk to, that I could have really used some of that wholesome, cool uncle advice he'd always had on hand? Well, guess what? Like some miraculous act of God, whose truck should I find parked in the trees but Coach Collins? This is weirdly comic moments at first when I'm super happy to see his truck. But I also realize I'm carrying the beer I stole from my dad. I dart back out of sight, toss the beer, then start chomping on the stick to double mint that I've been carrying to get the smell of booze off my breath. I'm just about to come back around the trees for a second time when the passenger door of the coach's truck swings open. I watched as someone basically falls out of it, stumbles through the feet, then leans up against a tree and starts puking. I could tell right away it wasn't Coach Collins. It actually looked like a girl, and it was confirmed when I heard the kind of high-pitched puking sound she made. Okay, I realize that might sound weird, but guys and girls puke different. It is what it is. But anyway, I started straining my eyes to see who it is. Light is getting pretty low at that point, and without being able to see behind the mess of long hair, it was hard to tell exactly who it was. But then I hear Coach Collins saying something from inside the truck. Only it didn't sound like the Coach Collins I knew the back in the truck. Maria. Then I realized who it was. Maria and I had chemistry together, so I'd spoke to her once or twice, and she'd been a cheerleader for the longest time until recently dropping out of her squad. Her dropping out of the squad had coincided with a decline in her GPA and an overall odd shift in her behavior. A bunch of rumors went around that ran the spectrum of patiently ridiculous to sinisterly believable, but the truth had remained in the dark. He had something was definitely having a negative effect on Maria. And there came a moment when I realized I might have just found out what that thing was. In among the trees, maybe 40 or 50 feet away, I watched Maria wiping her mouth before the coach yelled something at her from the driver's seat. "Don't make me tell you again, Maria. Get back in the truck." Maria seemed to be fighting back tears, like getting back in the truck was the last thing on earth she wanted to do. Then I literally can't believe what I'm seeing as she turns, tug on her jeans a little that buttons and close. I'm glad I don't have to explain the connotation of that, because even after all these years later, the idea still makes my skin crawl. Only as Maria turns, I must have been leaning too far out from the tree I'm using for cover, because there's this one horrible moment where we both just lock eyes for a second. I assume I'm busted, so I start edging away before breaking into a run back toward Cousin Street. As I'm running, I keep expecting to hear the truck revving its engine, either to follow me or take off to avoid being seen again. But nothing happens. I just run and run and run until I reach the Talbot Road bridge that led back to Little John and home. Once I was home and had calmed down a bit, I started to wonder why I ran in the first place. I know it sounds horrible. In retrospect, the way Coach was talking to Maria should have told me everything I needed to know. There was a lack of empathy that she was vomiting, not to mention the question why she was vomiting in the first place. But I was young, scared, and embarrassingly drunk off of one beer, so I tried to rationalize. I didn't even really see Coach Collins, and it's possible that someone else in the area owned a truck the same model as his. Sure, the voice sounded like him, but that didn't mean it was. Besides, if something shady was going on, surely Maria would have told me since she'd seen me and all. But thinking of it, had she seen me? Maybe I just imagined she had. And if they were doing something awful, why not speed off or give chase? There was a lot that I could interpret as being totally harmless, but there was a disturbing amount that indicated that what I had seen was something very, very wrong. But then, what had to be do about it? Accuse Coach Collins, the small-town war hero, a father, a husband, the best hockey coach in the Northeast, of being a freaking predator? That was unthinkable to me. What if I accused him and there was a perfectly reasonable explanation? I'd be a pariah. I wouldn't be able to show my face around town, let alone at hockey practice. The same hockey practice I love had and he coached? I'm sorry to ramble. I just need you to understand my mindset about it and why I kept so quiet about the whole thing for like a straight week. I know it was the wrong play. And to everyone reading this, especially to Maria, and sorry, you just have to understand. I figure if anything was going to go down, it'd be the next day at school. Maybe Maria would confront me about spying on her or something. I had no idea. Everything was still so unclear at the time, hence my hesitancy to act on it. But nothing happened. No one said anything. Coach Collins passed me in the hallway and just said morning like he normally did. I tried to act normal about it. I tried to push it all way in the back of my mind. But I've never been very good at hiding the way I feel. I know people noticed the change in my attitude. Mother weekend, my mom was asking why I was being so quiet. I told her I was just tired, but I guess it's because it's the only thing I wanted to talk about was off limits. I especially couldn't act the same around Coach Collins, and it was only when I went to check out his truck after school that I got any sense of reassurance. I noticed that there was this big Support Our Troops sticker on his back bumper, something I didn't remember seeing on the trunk in the woods that day. But as much as I tried to ignore it, the fact remains that I simply may not have noticed it at the time, because understandably, I was very much distracted by other events. But still, I kept my mouth shut, and actually took a few more days before I actually did anything about it. The day I broke was exactly a week after the event for 7 nights straight. All I thought about before I drifted off into an uneasy sleep was the possibility of Coach Collins being the voice in the truck, of how if he was doing something seriously evil to Maria right under the noses of everyone in town, then I had to do something about it. I wouldn't be able to live with myself otherwise. So I decided to approach Maria. I couldn't just ask who she was with promise to keep my mouth shut and live with the consequences. I didn't have to drop Coach Collins' name, and I could just gauge her reaction to the question. And when I looked at it like that, it seemed all easy and simple. I mean, she told me if she needed help, right? And that's what I did. I came up with Maria after chemistry one afternoon, asked if I could talk to her in private, apologized for what I was about to ask, then just hit her with it. Who were you with near the power station last week? The way she looked at me at first made me think she was about to just deny it. This mocking and crazy kind of look. I cut her off with, I know as you I saw you. And you saw me too. I just need to know who you were with. After that, all her bluster just melted away, and the confident ex-cheerleader began to look like a scared little girl. No one, she said, and just walked off towards lockers. I tried one more time to talk to her about it, but as she walked past me in the school parking lot, all she had to say to me was leave me alone. That was the crushing moment that I realized that my worst fears had come true. And then nothing about little John could ever be the same for me ever again. The trouble was, I was at something of an impasse. Even if I did tell the cops about the coach, she'd have to actually want to talk to someone about it. Otherwise, all I had was a baseless accusation that might ruin my life completely. If I was going to do anything, it needed to be well planned and delicately executed. But just what that was, I had no idea at the time. And the week since I saw Murray in the woods, I had skipped hockey practice twice. And the times I showed up, I ducked Coach Collins when he asked me about my usual ride home. But that evening, when I fumbled for some excuse about going over to a friend's house to study, he said something that made my stomach tie itself into a knot. "Get in the truck." The tone was almost the exact same as he had been in the woods previously. If there was any doubt still left in my mind, there wasn't after that. Part of me wanted to just get in the truck and go back to pretending like I hadn't seen anything. Or if I did, it was all perfectly explainable. But the other part of me, the rational part, told me that getting in Coach Collins' truck was a very, very bad idea. I told him no. Nothing else. Just one solitary no. And what followed were a few moments of silence as I saw a look come over the coach's face that I'd never seen before. He became cold, expressionless, and only later did it occur to me that what I was looking at might have been the last thing one or two Viet Cong guerrillas saw before. "You know?" Then he spoke. "Have you got something you want to ask me, son?" I just shook my head. "Good. Because being so close to graduating, it would be a shame if anything were to keep you from your studies, wouldn't?" He said, and waited for a response, and I didn't say a thing in reply. "Kid like you has a lot of potential. You can enroll in some fancy college across the country, get some well-paid big city job, and just leave little John behind. Never look back. You understand me?" The horrible thing was, I didn't understand. I heard what he said, and I saw the appeal, but I hated him. I felt betrayed, and I wanted everyone to know he was a liar, a cheat, and a predator. So after a week of doing nothing, I finally went home and told my mom I know it was something I should have done a week prior. It was obvious just from how tactful she knew how to handle the situation. She drove over to Maria's house, talked to Maria's mom, and private, she was quick to add. Then the pair of them approached Maria and just, I didn't even know, used their mom magic to just coax it out of her. But the time she got home around 10, just 3 hours after she left, she said Maria and her mom were ready to go to the police. Only the thing is, unlike Hollywood movies where there's usually some big resolution and everyone gets their just desserts, etc., this story doesn't have a real end to it. Coach Collins was questioned by police, but since the DEA or judge, whoever, didn't think there was enough evidence to push for a trial, the coach was never arrested or charged with anything. Maria, on the other hand, died in a car accident where the other driver was twice over the legal limit. Just smashed into her and her sister while they were coming back from Portland one night. It was a horrific tragedy and meant that whatever secrets Maria had went to her grave with her. But the cherry on top is not only was Coach Collins never punished for what he did, but he was right about me. I went into a college on Seattle, ended up getting a job here in Oregon. Mom and Dad moved into Portland as they got older. So I've not been back to Little John in almost 20 years now, and honestly, I'd like to keep it that way. I can't stand small towns in general anymore. My wife thinks that's cutesy and kitsch, but only because she grew up in Chicago. Me, I know how small towns work. I know they all have dark secrets buried just below the surface. But unlike big cities where bad things happen all the time, people just don't see it. In small towns, people know all about the bad things, and it's not that they can't see it, they just choose not to.
I was 17 at that time, and I need to give you a little background. It was 80s and before cell phones. I'm a female, and I had a best friend at my high school who I'll call C for short. C and I met when her brother asked me to be his girlfriend, and she didn't like me at first. She would walk around me and taunt me, but once I stood up to her, she began to respect me and then got to know me properly. How? Because I knew her and her brother It was a very short-lived romance. I spent a lot of time hanging around at their house. And C also had a young twin brothers, her mom and her older male cousin who lived in the house. Over the time I became close friends with the family, and her mother even offered me a job. She sold beautiful clothes via fashion shows and asked me to be a model. I really enjoyed that job and the friendship I made. Then one night, she asked me to spend the night, which I hadn't done before, so I said yes. But I couldn't get a ride to her house until it was already pretty late, and my ride dropped me off, and rather than waiting to see if I got in safely, just drove away. Walking up to the house, it was completely dark and quiet, and when I knocked, no one came to the door. I knocked again, and still nothing. I was stuck there and had to get someone to wake up and let me in. And I was beginning to get scared. There were a couple of other houses on the street, but for some reason they were all dark and quiet too. I walked about a quarter of a mile down the dark, deserted street to a payphone, and I dialed C's number. After several rings, she eventually answered and unlocked the door for me. As I walked back to her house from the phone booth, she went back to the bed, and I went into the house. It was as dark as quiet inside as it was outside, and I made my way to her room, where I thought I was going to be sleeping, but she'd fallen back to sleep and locked her bedroom door. Her young twin brothers were still awake and invited me to sleep in their room, as they had 2 sets of bunk beds, so each twin had his own bed with an extra for the older cousin. I didn't see the other brother, my former boyfriend, that night at all. That was a fine situation for me, as I liked the twins, who were about 9 years old. So I lay in one of the bottom bunks, and I was ready to sleep. The boys were talking like kids do, and they were fine, but the older cousin was in there as well, I believe in the bunk above me. But they never turned on the light, so I wasn't really sure. Now, while the twins talked and giggled about nothing, the cousin, who was at least 20, maybe older, began making very inappropriate comments to me, which in pitch blackness was all the more unsettling, because I couldn't see where he even was in the room. At first, I ignored him, thinking he was just being a dick. But he persisted. It didn't matter to him that the 2 young boys were in the same room either, and he got more and more explicit in saying the things he wanted to do with me. I was really creeped out by this point, but I still didn't think he would actually do anything. I kept asking him to stop talking to me like that, but he wouldn't. It just escalated, and I couldn't tell he was going to leave me alone, so I finally got up and walked out of the room, still in the dark, and I made my way to my friend's room right across the hall. I knocked on her bedroom door. When she didn't make a sound, I could see that C was a very deep sleeper, and her door was still locked. This entire time, the cousin kept talking and scaring me, and as I frantically tried to wake my friend, he began getting out of his bunk and coming towards the hall where I was. I had to do something fast. For some reason, C's mom wasn't home that night. But since I had spent so much precious time in that house, I knew it pretty well. I knew that there was a den right there next to the room that I had been in with the boys, and I knew that den door was locked. Just as the cousin reached me in the hallway, I screamed a little, ran into the den and slammed the door in his face, immediately turning the lock all in one motion. that room was even darker. So the first thing I wanted to do was to turn on the light, but I couldn't find one anywhere. I searched for the light because I wanted to push something else in front of the door, knowing that the little door lock was not a strong one. But I couldn't find light anywhere, and within about 2 minutes, I could hear the cousin fiddling with the locks. He got it open so fast, he might as well have used a key. So now he had me where he wanted me, and he quickly closed and relocked the door. We were now completely alone in the dark room, with nowhere around to stop him. The twins had stayed in their beds throughout, and there was nothing they could have done anyway. This guy then very quickly grabbed me towards him, putting one hand over my mouth and nose so I could neither scream nor breathe very well. His other hand went right between my legs, and he was touching me in my most private place, as I was at his mercy and barely breathing. He quietly said things in my ears as I struggled to breathe and somehow defend myself. He was behind me, and his arms were wrapped around mine in such a way that I couldn't use them. I'd been in a similar situation with a man in my not-so-distant past, so this time I was angry. I did not want to do this to happen to me again. He went on for a few minutes, which seemed like an eternity. And just when I thought I'd run out of hope, miraculously there was a knock on the door of the den. It was my friend C. She hadn't woken up when I was pounding on her bedroom door, but some kind of divine interventions had somehow caused her to wake up now. "What's going on in there?" she asked. The man tightened his grip on my mouth and nose so they couldn't make a sound. And he said to her, "We're okay, we're okay." And here I tried all my might to at least make some kind of sound. But since I couldn't get a breath in, I couldn't manage it. I will forever be eternally grateful for my friend C at that moment, as she didn't just go back to the bed thinking I was messing around with her cousin. Instead, she said that she wanted to hear me say I was okay, and that's when the cousin knew he had lost and let go of me. I immediately screamed, "Help me!" and I ran into her bedroom with her falling behind me. She then closed and locked the bedroom door. I was gasping for air, crying and trying to tell her everything that had happened. She had trouble calming me down, as I was still terrified, and I told her that he could pick her lock if he wanted to, and would come in and get me. She promised that she wouldn't let that happen, and much later I was somehow able to fall asleep. In the morning, I woke up instantly, afraid of remembering what had happened the night before, and C wasn't in the room with me. I panicked for a moment, thinking the cousin was still somewhere in the house, but after a moment, I had my friend talking with her mom, who had arrived back home. I joined them at the table and learned that C had already filled her mom in on everything. Her mom told me she was sorry about what had happened, and that morning she had already thrown the cousin out of the house, and that he would never be allowed to come back. At that moment, I had been certain I was going to report it, as I hadn't reported my previous assault, because I felt like it had somewhat been my fault, and I didn't want anyone to find out about it. I was still struggling with the decision, but this time I was angry, and I did not deserve to have that happen to me. These people had felt like my second family for a while, and that mom was my boss at the job I enjoyed very much. I didn't want to hurt them, and I certainly didn't want to jeopardize my relationship with the mom and my job. The most important thing was, though, is this time. I knew none of it had been my fault, and I knew my worth. I realized that no matter what a woman does, nothing gave a man the right to force himself upon her. And I had gained quite a bit of strength through this experience. So the point was not whether I'd reported the incident or not. I'm going to leave that part up to you, the reader, to decide. To all women, even men, that I recommend carrying a pepper spray in a stun gun, as I do now. I won't get into discussion about guns, but you can still stop an attacker, even a dog or a bear, even from a distance of up to 4 yards with a pepper spray, and up close you can disable them with a stun gun and get away safely without killing anyone. My wish for everyone listening this is to please stay safe and be aware of your surroundings.
During high school, our friend group was the most popular one. There were 6 members: me, Sophia, Chloe, Ella, Oliver, and James. At first, it was just me, Sophia, Chloe, and Ella, but then Chloe started to date James, so James and his best friend Oliver tagged along in our group as well. James and Chloe were the ideal couple in our class. They used to sit together, eat together, go everywhere together, and they even used to be absent on the same day. We were annoyed by these lovebirds. But one day, all of a sudden, James stopped coming to school. Chloe told us that he didn't inform her about this either. We went to ask teachers, and they told us that his parents found a note which said that he wanted to take a break from everything and will be back within a month. Chloe was heartbroken because she loved James. She started to stay silent, mostly lost in her own thought. We tried multiple attempts to cheer her up, but it was of no use. Gradually, she started distancing herself from us. Still, Oliver and I used to try of having at least small talk with her, but she managed to completely cut herself from the group. Days went by, and we started to notice changes in Chloe's behavior. For example, suddenly she would look panicked and start sweating, or she would sleep during the class and suddenly wake up as if she had just had a nightmare. We started to grow worried, so we asked her. Olivia approached her first, saying, "Hey Chloe, can we talk to you for a minute?" She nodded, and I said, "Listen, we are worried about you, and if anything is bothering you, you know you can talk to us, right?" She looked at us and said, while faking a smile, "Yes, of course, and no, don't worry, I'm all right." She left after saying that. We could tell that something was wrong with her. We just did not know what and how to help her. After a few days, when we were leaving after school, a girl named Kara fell from the top floor of our school building. Everyone started to scream. The teachers came and called an ambulance. On the way to the hospital, she died. The school declared it an accident, but Kara's parents insisted on an investigation. So the investigation started. It was found that the last dialed number on Kara's phone was Chloe's. Chloe was called for questioning, but she denied it, saying she promised to meet her, but before they could meet, she died. Other students who were close to Kara were called in for questioning. They told the police that they did see Kara approaching Chloe sometimes. I remember that before James left school, he also saw Kara coming to Chloe once and handing her something, but Chloe threw it without even seeing it. They checked the CCTV installed near the stairs, and Chloe was seen going toward the terrace. Chloe became the main suspect and was called again for questioning. She kept denying about killing Kara. She eventually broke down and started crying. "I did not kill her. I was only trying to ask her about James," she said while sobbing. She told the police about what happened before Kara's death and after James's disappearance. 2 days after James stopped coming to school, Chloe found a picture of James. He was unconscious. His legs and hands were tied. Chloe panicked and decided to report this and put the picture in her locker. When she checked again, the picture wasn't there, but instead there was a note saying, "Don't try to act over smart by telling this to anyone." Chloe got scared and did not tell anyone. The next day, she found a package which contained part of James's finger, and there was a note, "A gift for you." Chloe screamed and threw it. She started to have nightmares about it. The notes kept coming with instructions written over it. The note also threatened her that if she tells anyone, the rest of her friends, along with James, will die. That was the time when she started to distance herself from us. She received a flower along with the note, which was delivered at her address. The note said, "If you want me to spare James, accept my love." The next day, Kara asked Chloe out, but Chloe was too panicked from all those anonymous letters and threats that she instantly refused. That night, before school was about to end, she received a call from Kara asking her to come to the rooftop if she wants to know about James. And when Chloe went there, Kara revealed it was her sending the threat messages all along. Kara told her that she was in love with her and often stalked her. She also found out combination codes for her locker and put a letter to confess her feelings. But Chloe never saw the letter. And one day, she announced dating James. Kara felt heartbroken and decided to end her life, but could not. And one day, she decided she would confess her feelings no matter what. She wrote a letter and handed it to Chloe, but Chloe threw it without even checking. When Chloe threw her love letter, it made her so angry that one day when James was walking home through a secluded area, she hit on his head with a baseball bat and kidnapped him. She put him on lots of drugs so that he could not escape. She then started to send Chloe anonymous letters. They started arguing, and when Chloe said she is going to report this right away and turned, Kara grabbed her by the hand. When Chloe was trying to pull her hand away from her, she accidentally fell. Chloe got so panicked that she ran from there. Police searched and found James in an abandoned building near Kara's house. He was on the effects of drugs. When he came to his senses, police questioned him and found that Chloe was right. After further investigation, Chloe was found innocent, and Kara's death was declared an accident. Let me tell you that I am a prisoner and I am in jail. I was charged with the murder of my husband and I accept it. I don't feel any regret in doing so, as he was a maniac and he deserved this. I killed him with my own hands, and after that, I surrendered to the cops. Most of you were thinking why I killed him. Just listen to my story from the start and you will know this. I was married to a couple of heavy alcoholic business freaks who was habitual to drinking. Since he was my father's business partner, there was no point in my choice and my own decisions. Just after my graduation, I got the bad news that he had selected a boy, and after 3 months, I was married to that freak. He was a complete monster in bed, and I knew this on my first day after marriage. He made me scream and cry with pain just to fulfill his satisfaction. I begged him, but he tortured me mercilessly. I could think of nothing but only how someone could do this to her own wife. After that day, I was abused again and again, to my breaking point by my own husband. I couldn't bear his torture any, and just after 4 months of getting married, we got apart. I applied for a divorce, but he didn't sign it. It was not a big deal for me, as I had decided not to return to him ever again. Soon, after being apart, I got to know that I was having his child in my belly. I was pregnant, but being a mother, I knew that it was not his or her fault, so I decided to give birth to him and live with him happily. After 9 months, I gave birth to a beautiful and cute baby girl. I knew that if he would know about this, there was no way he was going to accept her as his child, but neither was I going to tell him. We have divorced already, at least from my side, and that was enough for me. I raised my baby to be a nice young girl, and everything was good until she turned 16. In all these years, I had never heard about him, and neither did I want to. But that was my biggest mistake, to think that he had left me alone. It was winter, and it was too cold outside, so everyone used to go to bed early, and our house was not connected to any of our neighbors. One day, he returned to me again, but this time as a totally different person. I was fooled by his words and fell into his trap. I accepted him by giving him mercy, But on the same day, he showed his true colors. He returned home like before in a completely drunk condition. I couldn't let him see my daughter in this condition, so I asked my daughter to go into her room. But he was a maniac, an alcoholic. He came to me and started beating me and abusing me. I was crying and screaming for help, but there was no one except my daughter. She couldn't see me in that state and ran to protect me, but she was not aware of him, and that was the biggest mistake she made. She tried to stop her, but he kicked her so hard that she fell into a corner and couldn't get up, but screamed in pain. He was angry with her, so he pulled me by my hair and looked at me inside the room. After this, he went to my daughter and raped her. He was a complete maniac, and even with her daughter, he acted like a beast. I could hear my daughter scream in pain while he was abusing her, but I was helpless and I couldn't do anything. All of a sudden, the whole thing was covered with scary silence. I shouted for my daughter and asked my husband to leave her from inside the room. After a few seconds, I heard footsteps coming toward me. I started begging him to open the door, and he opened it. I pushed him and ran to my daughter. She was lying on the floor and was bleeding. She was covered with scratches and brushes all over her body and was lying on the floor completely nude. It was his doing. The beast even didn't leave her daughter. I shook her again and again and shouted at her to get up, but she wasn't reacting at all. And how could she when she was already dead? She couldn't bear his torture, and it was all due to him. I looked at him with killer intention, and he shouted at me and asked me to bring a chilled drink for him from the refrigerator. I didn't say a word to him. I stood up, went to the refrigerator, and took out a bottle of red wine. He was sitting on the sofa facing me. The wine bottle was chilled and was making my hands numb. The drink inside was frozen, rock hard. I raised the bottle and hit my husband on the head several times until I could see him all covered in blood. I killed him with my own hands and then laughed out loud, but the tears won't stop bursting out of my eyes. I went to my daughter's body and I told her that I was responsible for her death and I was the one who gave him another chance. I should have killed him when he was doing such things with me, but I left her and let him kill my daughter. After sitting for about an hour, I called the cops and asked them to come to my house. When they arrived, they found 2 dead bodies and I was sitting there. They asked me, and I told them everything. They felt pity for me, but I had killed my husband. It was part of their duty to arrest me. I was arrested and charged with killing my husband, even though he was the one who killed my daughter. But I was not feeling guilty, and neither did I regret what I did. He was a demon, and he deserved his punishment. The only guilt I had was that just because of my little mistake, my sweet daughter lost her life. She had her whole life ahead of her, and now she was buried in the ground with all her dreams. I ask this question to my readers. What do you think? What I did was wrong or not? Decide this, and think to yourself what you had done if you were in my place.
On July 28, 1977, Travis Victor Alexander was born in Riverside, California, the son of Gary and Pamela Alexander. Travis's early years were marred by tragedy. At age 11, an unstable and ultimately toxic home life meant that Travis would be forced to go and live with his paternal grandparents. And after his father's tragic death in mid-1997, he was followed by his 7 brothers and sisters. Despite his rough upbringing, Travis performed rather well in school, attending college and eventually getting a job with a company known as Prepaid Legal Services as a salesman, and later as the company's motivational speaker, a position that paid considerably better. As part of his job at PPL, Travis would often attend conferences that took place in Las Vegas, plying his trade as a motivational speaker in front of audiences of hundreds. During one such conference in September of 2006, there was one particular woman in the audience who was enraptured by Travis's charisma and his talent for public speaking. She approached him afterwards, introducing herself and striking up a conversation that would spark off a long-term friendship. This woman's name was Jody Arias. Jody Ann Arias was born on July 9th, 1980, in Salinas, California, to a mother of European ancestry and a father of Mexican ancestry. After she met Travis at the PPL conference, the pair grew increasingly close, which led to Jody converting to Mormonism just 2 months later, actually being baptized by Travis himself at a ceremony that took place in Southern California. Despite the distance between them, the pair then began dating a few months later, and Jody even took the steps to move to Mesa and then Yreka, California, living in her grandparents' place so she could be closer to Travis. Travis and Jody had a tumultuous, on and off again relationship for almost a year and a half, often forced to maintain a long-distance relationship due to the fact that one of them lived in Arizona, while the other had to remain in California for work. This kind of distance would put a strain on any relationship, but it appeared there were other factors at work that made Jody and Travis's relationship less than healthy. From the very first time that Travis introduced Jody to his close friends, they seemed to take an instant dislike to her. Jody didn't seem in the least bit keen to impress or ingratiate herself to them, seeming generally disinterested in anyone but Travis. His friends detected a kind of jealousy to her, how she seemed to act overly possessive of Travis, yet at the same time didn't seem to show him much affection either. From the get-go, they found Jody's behavior worrying, even frightening. Shortly after Jody moved into her grandparents' home in Yreka, she and Travis arranged to accompany one another on a week-long work-related trip to Cancun, down in Mexico. The trip was scheduled for June 15th, and the couple intended to make something of a vacation out of it. However, not long after, Travis reportedly went to company HQ to request that his travel companion be changed to another member of the sales team. There has been much speculation regarding why exactly this is, but our best guess is to assume that it involved a breakdown in his and Jody's relationship. Then on May 28th, Jody called Travis in a state of distress. She told him there had been a burglary at her grandparents' place, where she was staying, and felt so unsafe that she begged to come and stay with him for a while. The burglars had apparently stolen a number of valuable items during the break-in, but perhaps the most significant was a .25 caliber Colt pistol which had belonged to her grandfather. Police had no luck finding the perpetrators, and eventually gave up looking altogether, as they couldn't seem to find a single shred of evidence that might give them a clue to the identity of any of the people involved. In the face of Jody begging to stay with him, Travis straight up refused. This is perhaps the best evidence we have that their pair had broken up by that point. If Travis loved her or had any feelings at all for her, surely he would have offered her a place to stay. Only he didn't. Or maybe it was the case that Travis did love her, but something else was stopping him from inviting her over. It's possible that there have been many another woman in Travis's life. However, it's also possible that Travis didn't invite Jody over because he was afraid of her. Jody called Travis yet again on June 2nd, repeatedly attempting to reach him between the hours of 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., but her cell phone records show that, since the longest call was a mere 17 seconds, he apparently didn't pick up the phone. Then, just after 3 in the morning, Travis called Jody back, and the pair engaged in a lengthy conversation. We have no idea what was said during the call, but we do know that at around 5:30 that same morning, Jody drove over to a car rental place over in Redding, California, entering the business shortly after it opened at 8 a.m. She told the clerk that she wished to use the car for the long drive to Utah for a work-related trip, and then drove it to visit a few friends on her way to Utah, where she would meet up with a fellow PPL employee by the name of Ryan Burns. Yet Jody didn't show up to meet Ryan until late in the evening on June 3rd, leaving a sizable amount of time to be accounted for that day. And when she did show up in the West Jordan suburb of Salt Lake City to meet up with Ryan Burns, her colleague noticed some unusual things about her. Firstly, he saw that her normally dyed blonde hair was now brown, but not its natural shade of brown, and that she seemed to have cuts or scratches all over her hands. Jody also refused to let him near the rental car, insisting that they take his car to the PPL business conference. Naturally, Ryan thought this behavior was unusual, but the pair had more important things to think about, as the conference would keep each of them occupied for the majority of the day. Ryan had another reason to keep quiet about such unusual behavior, and that's because he and Jody had begun something of a love affair during their time in Utah, with the two spending several hours hugging and kissing on a large beanbag chair at the place that they were staying. Jody also reassured him about the cuts on her hands by telling him that she had gotten them while working part-time at a Mexican restaurant in the Wairika area, an excuse that seemed good enough for him to quiet his suspicions. Once their business was adjourned, Jody departed from Salt Lake City on June the 6th, driving back westward towards California. Her cell phone records showed that she attempted to call Travis several times, leaving a handful of voicemails, yet she apparently also found a way to access this voicemail system. Why exactly she chose to do so is still a matter of conjecture, but we can all agree that it constitutes some rather unusual behavior. When she returned the rental car to the outlet in Redding, the clerk began to inspect the interior as a matter of routine. It is then that he too noticed something unusual. The vehicle was missing its floor mats on the driver and passenger side. There were also some kind of stains on the upholstery, as if some thick liquid had been spilled and then left to dry. However, since the upholstery was black and the color of said liquid was not visible, no suspicions were raised among the staff at the car rental outlet, and the interior was clean before it could be inspected by anyone of any importance. Meanwhile, a few days prior, Travis's employers had tried to contact him for a conference call, only to have their calls unanswered. The same pattern repeated itself for a few days, with friends and colleagues calling only for Travis to not pick up his phone. By June 9th, as a handful of Travis's friends were beginning to worry amongst themselves regarding his well-being, they agreed to go over to his home to check up on him. They spoke to a few of the other tenants who lived in the same building as Travis did, and found that they had not seen him in a few days. But since he traveled for work frequently, they didn't seem to think that there was anything to worry about. However, one of Travis's neighbors was in possession of a spare key to his apartment, which Travis has entrusted them with on the off chance he should ever lose his keys. The concerned group of friends proceeded to unlock the door to Travis's apartment, calling out his name as they entered. Then one of them froze with a sharp gasp, pointing to a pool of congealed blood that sat in the hallway in Travis's bedroom. In a panic, they began to search the apartment for him, eventually being greeted by the sight of his days-old corpse, which was lying in the bathtub, covered in blood. His friends cried and screamed as they called 911, but they did not attempt to revive him, as it was obvious from the state of his dead body that he had been deceased for a while. During the 911 call that followed the discovery, a police dispatcher asked if Travis had potentially thought about ending his own life, or if his friends knew of anyone who may have been threatening his life. His friends immediately mentioned Jody Arias, his ex-girlfriend, as a possible suspect in his murder. He said that, in the days prior to his death, Travis had mentioned that Jody had been stalking him, accusing him of seeing someone else, and seemed to be in some kind of jealous rage. This psychopathic jealousy had led her to begin attempting to access his Facebook account, and even going so far as slashing his car's tires. When investigating police arrived at Travis's home, they commenced an intense search for any evidence or clues as to the identity of his killer. One of the most curious things they discovered was a recently purchased digital camera in the washing machine. Despite a large amount of water damage, police were able to recover the camera's memory card and found on it a number of photographs which someone had apparently attempted to delete. These photographs showed Travis and Jody in numerous suggestive poses taken on the afternoon of June 4th. The final photograph in the series was taken at 5:39 p.m. that same day and showed Travis alive and well while he was taking a shower. In it, he was smiling playfully, completely naked, a candid depiction of the man's final moments. As another photograph, taken just minutes later, showed Travis bleeding profusely while lying on the bathroom floor. DNA samples were taken from bloody handprints found in the bathroom, which gave police all the evidence they needed to arrest a suspect, as they contained not only Travis's DNA, but Jody Arias's too. After being indicted for first-degree murder by a grand jury in Maricopa County, Jody was arrested at her home in California and then extradited to Arizona on September 5, 2008. Less than a week later, she pled not guilty, giving several different accounts of her alleged involvement in Travis's death. At first, she told investigating police officers that she was nowhere near Arizona on the day her ex-boyfriend was murdered. Then, after pressure from the cops, she admitted she was present at the time of his death, but that it had involved a home invasion, whereby two individuals broke into Travis's residence before killing him and attacking her in turn. 2 years of investigation later, Jody then changed her story entirely, telling the police that she had indeed killed Travis, but had only done so in self-defense. She spun a tale of brutal domestic violence, how she was a victim of a cruel and violent man, and how she regularly feared for her life around him. At her trial in February of 2013, Jody told the jury that she had been physically and emotionally abused by her parents, and that her life with Travis had echoed that same cycle of abuse and guardianship, one that she wanted to escape from, but couldn't quite bring herself to. She went on to describe the abusive type of life that Travis subjected her to, one that included a great deal of BDSM and other painful acts, most of which were in direct violation of the Mormon rules regarding such things. Jody also had recorded a phone conversation that she had with Travis, one that she used as evidence to prove that at one point Travis had wanted to use zip ties to tie her to a tree while she was dressed as Little Red Riding Hood. Jody is heard to respond enthusiastically on the phone, but told the court it was all an act, that the idea terrified her, and was typical of the kinds of things that Travis wanted to do. Jody also mentioned that Travis had admitted to find underage children attractive, basically painting him to be a complete monster. However, the prosecution argued that Jody was a vengeful, vindictive person who had only recorded the phone conversation in an attempt to blackmail Travis and embarrass him in front of his Mormon peers. The prosecution also questioned a forensic expert before the jury, prompting them to say that there had been a thorough examination of Travis's computer, one in which absolutely had no evidence of child pictures found, nor were there any references to anything intimate with children. Rebuttal witnesses from the prosecution also included several of Travis's other girlfriends, who stated he never exhibited any problems with anger or violence. Clinical psychologist Janine DeMarthe testified for the prosecution, stating that she found no evidence that Travis had ever abused Jody. DeMarthe also said that Jody suffered from borderline personality disorder, showing signs of immaturity and an unstable sense of identity. The final nail in Jody's legal coffin was the prosecution telling the jury that a single .25 caliber bullet casing was found near Travis's body, the same caliber of the gun that was stolen from her grandparents' place just a week before the murder. As it turns out, Jody had faked the entire burglary just to obtain the murder weapon, which not only showed that she was a dangerous psychopath, willing to hurt those close to her to achieve her goals, but that she had actually been planning to kill Travis for quite some time. After the trial, that had reportedly cost the U.S. taxpayer over $3 million, the jury found Jody guilty of first-degree murder, and she only narrowly avoided the death penalty when a judge essentially took pity on her mental illness, sentencing her to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. She was also ordered to pay Travis's siblings over $30,000 in damages. As of 2016, Jody is housed at Arizona State Prison Complex, Perryville, and her case and trial have been the subject of a great deal of social media interest, with even Donald Trump commenting on what he called her obvious guilt. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the whole sordid drama is that Travis may well have genuinely believed that he had found the love of his life, and how in searching for the fairy tale romance that all people want deep down, he found the polar opposite, a living nightmare that would end in him losing his life to someone who could fairly be described as a conniving, violent, psychopathic predator. Relationships break down all the time, for a variety of reasons. People hurt, people cry, but most ultimately move on and find someone else. Jody took that chance away from Travis in a horridly callous and bloody manner. Instead of letting Travis go, she dragged him down like a sinking ship, one which neither of them will ever emerge from intact.